Yeah, so it has been almost a year, and it's been a rather eventful year, 2024, and the beginning of 2025.
Yeah, totally. Quite a bit's happened. Trump's getting a second term, and he was almost assassinated like three times. We had a pharma or a CEO almost actually assassinated, pretty much in front of everyone.
He
Um,
he was assassinated. United Healthcare. It was a health insurance company CEO.
yeah,
The health insurance company that had built itself a reputation for the most health insurance denial claims more than every other company because the CEO that got assassinated created an algorithm to just automatically deny people's claims.
yeah, and I can also see that online. Mangione, he actually got like a lot of support for what he did, and I think that it sparked a lot of outrage and indignation amongst people, especially people that are more morally indignified about murder, and it kind of brought up questions about is it okay to murder if a person in that position is already automatically and very dispassionately, a lot of people would argue, deciding that it's okay for others to die because they can't meet insurance premiums or they might have pre-existing conditions or whatever type of situation they might find themselves in.
Yeah, I mean, this is that phenomenon of violence is never the answer, but it's okay when we do it. You know how school teachers say violence revenge is never the answer, but we're allowed to abuse you as much as we feel like it.
Yeah, totally. It's a
It's hypocrisy.
yeah, and there was someone that I used to follow on Twitter named Parallax Optics, and he noted this. It's called like celebration parallax, where there's like an asymmetric relation to you might objectively just view the same action that someone might commit, but depending on what political allegiance you have, you might view the action as okay when your side does it, but egregious when the other side does it, even though it's objectively the same action, no matter which side takes part in it.
Yeah, and this kind of ties into something that we touched on before in a previous discussion, if I remember correctly. It's got to do with the haves and have-nots. The people who have the haves, they got their power and they don't want to let it go, and
Yeah,
so a moment of equality is going to feel like oppression for the people who are running these health insurance companies, as well as all the politicians and political commentators that are brown nosing the hell out of them. And I for a while I kind of stayed quiet about everything going on around the health insurance CEO assassination. But it's not that I wasn't paying attention to it. I definitely was. I mean, it's impossible. It was impossible to ignore because it was all over the news. In fact, I actually posted a video about it on YouTube, but unlike that 30-second Asmongold video clip that I shared on YouTube, which got like over 124,000 views, no one seemed to watch it yet. But one thing that I noticed a lot is after Luigi Mangione was trotted out as the prime suspect, a lot of people were making comparisons in to between that and A Bug's Life. Are you familiar with that kids Pixar film?
yeah, I remember watching it when I was a child. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, like when I was watching it as a child, I didn't really pay that much attention to the dialogue because, well, I just didn't when I was that age. But I do remember a few years ago watching someone was making a video that had an analogy that brought up A Bug's Life, and they pointed out the main antagonist's most famous speech, which was, "You let one ant stand up to us, then they'll all start standing up to us. Those tiny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1, and if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about collecting food, it's about keeping those ants in line." And I think that that's basically what's going on here. Like, let's be real. The government, as well as the news media, big media, violated Luigi Mangione's due process by they're practically, the way they are trotting him out in the news, they're basically already convicting him guilty before he's even had a trial. That was something that his lawyer brought up. Like, you guys violated due process because the way you're displaying him, all chained up and, like, being escorted by this entourage of, like, a bazillion cops and the New York City mayor walking behind him menacingly. Like, you're already like displaying him in such a way that you've already decided that he's guilty without him even having a chance to have a trial yet. And the reason why they're doing this, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a jury that they would try to do a jury nullification, but they're up against a government that wants to make an example out of them to discourage copycats. I think that they've even explicitly, like, expressed, either in an article or something, that they want to make an example out of them to the rest of us plebes.
Yeah. I also think it's really interesting how, if I remember correctly, I saw some of his tweets and I read, I think, his, like, short manifesto explaining why he did what he did and everything. And to me, it seemed like he was an aggrieved party with how United was not handling the care of his mother and the care of his back, if I remember correctly. But I also read that, like, he wanted to offer a little bit of criticism on the Japanese birth rate and how the birth rate issue is affecting globally, but he pretty much came out on the side of, like, that porn is a part of the problem, and that men need to either abstain from porn or that it needs to be banned. But he's a curious case for me, because on one side I hate the pharma or healthcare CEOs or whatever, but I'm pro pornography consumption and everything, to the point where, like, if you want to use the government to ban it, I consider you an enemy. So I kind of teeter-tottered between supporting him and then, like, well, it's just throw the book at him because he's my enemy anyway. He wants to use force or violence to control what I get to consume, so why should I be sympathetic for him? And there was also an interesting point where a lot of people would probably consider him to be the ladies' man. Like, he garnered a lot of female support and attention. Women just wanted him. And this sparked other discussions concerning hybristophilia and women liking, like, serial killers that are handsome. And in certain, like, black pill circles, there became, like, the concern of, like, why should men be moral if being moral doesn't get you female attention, but being a murderer gets you plenty of female attention?
Yeah, a lot I want to respond to. So I would just like to say, like, I'm kind of taking a similar position as the Maoist third worldist Jason Unruh, is that we like what it's that we're sympathetic to what he did and what he opposed, but we don't like him because, like, Jason Unruh pointed out the thing that you pointed out, which is something that I also knew about because I read some of his posts, that this guy is not a leftist. I mean, I'm not a leftist either, but this guy has very authoritarian right-wing views, which I find to be mightily 'Like, banning porn, like, here's the thing. if you are learning sex from porn, then I'm sorry, but you're an idiot. Not you, the person I'm talking to right now, but just there are people out there that unironically think like, oh, this is how you actually do it. It's like, no. Like, I would imagine that if you're having sex, it should be pretty obvious to you, like, without that. Or, I don't know, maybe I'm just a cut above the people that it influences. And also that I'm not into the same I'm also not into basic shit. I'm into some alternative stuff. Nothing illegal, but Luigi Mangione attracting a lot of he's attracting a lot of women. I mean, I can criticize him. I'm not a fan of him, but he took care of his body. He's in pretty good shape. He looks like he works out. I don't, but I don't fault him for that. I know that if I just started working out instead of wallowing in depression because I lost my job and for an entire year has been unable to find another one, and thus has been just into a depressive slump. But if I were to start working out like crazy, then I could look like that. So it's like, I think, yeah, there is hybristophilia, but I don't really dwell too much on the hybristophilia shit because there was a woman out there that did an in real life Yandere murder, and there was like a bazillion dudes that were thirsting over her because she was Japanese, not American. So I don't think hybristophilia is unique to women. I've seen men do it too. Like, there is a Instagram page called Mugshotties, and they post like mugshots of women who commit crimes, both violent and non-violent, and the comment section is full of guys who have absolutely no standards, who just thirst after them like you wouldn't believe. So I don't dwell too much on that aspect of all of this. I try to focus more on the bigger picture. Now, I forgot what I was going to say. Fuck. Also, if I cough a lot, I have a cold, so that's the reason for it. Oh, hey, this is a good topic of discussion then. But yeah, if Luigi Mangione goes away, like, I'm not personally invested in it, but at the same time, there is also kind of like, I know that the government is also like, yeah, this is what's going to happen to you if you stand up to the insurance companies. And getting back to what we were talking about earlier, you had certain political commentators like Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh like saying about how horrible this was and all that, and their audiences like turned on them. Have you ever watched did you ever see Nicolae Ceaușescu's last speech? Nicolae Ceaușescu was the dictator of the Socialist Republic of Romania. Have you ever seen that speech?
I did not see the speech, but I am aware that he was like assassinated. I actually like referenced that a little bit in like one of my antinatalist like interviews, where like he wanted to ban like abortion and stuff, and he got killed for it. And some people think it was a CIA plot, and others think it was more organic than that. But yeah, I have like an overall view.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA possibly had a hand in it, but there's a lot more to it than that. Yes, there was a time in history when Nicolae Ceaușescu created Decree 770, where he not only banned abortion, but he had government agents going around harassing people, basically trying to force them to have kids that they didn't want against their will. And it wasn't just that he was like a creep, but he was also just, in general, he was just a really, really oppressive tyrant. Same with his wife. His wife was a real piece of shit. They created their palace by destroying like a massive portion of Bucharest, and the people that used to live in their houses, they forced them to live in like shitty hab blocks. Like, really poorly made, poorly maintained, really poor, low quality apartments. They forced them all in there like sardines. Like, we complain when our government does stuff way less than that. I mean, if you were to actually think, if you were living in Romania, in Bucharest, where they did that, you would want to kill this guy. And that isn't even... And by the way, the tyranny doesn't end there. There was another instance where Nicolae Ceaușescu and his wife Elena were reviewing this like plan that some workers came up with, or I don't remember. I think they were like city officials or something. That they were overviewing some plan to create a train system to connect Bucharest to like other parts of the country or other parts of the city. And Nicolae Ceaușescu's wife Elena said, "You don't need trains. Walk to work. You're not skinny enough for my tastes. You need to lose weight." But the thing is, she wasn't even saying it like a joke. She was completely serious. And they were abusing this power because they were sadistic pieces of shit and they could get away with it. Until Mikhail Gorbachev moved the Soviet military out of Eastern Europe and into Afghanistan or somewhere else, or just refused to defend the Eastern Bloc countries. When he did that, the thing that was keeping people in line disappeared. So, on Christmas Day, 1989, Nicolae Ceaușescu was giving a speech, and for context, what happened that day was, people were going to school, they were going to work, just kind of like an average day in the life, and a quirk of that country, Nicolae Ceaușescu's about to give a speech, government officials nab everybody in the country at gunpoint, they force them to get into transports, they bring them to the city, they give them these, portraits of Nicolae Ceaușescu to hold up and, sign these elaborate banners to hoist up and all that. So, and they, tell them when to cheer to make it look like he's really supported. And so the demonstration was, Nicolae Ceaușescu was saying, "What a great demonstration. Okay, here's our plan for how we're going to, what we're going to do for this year." And the people were saying, I don't know what they were talking in Romania. I don't remember what they were saying. They were doing this clap, something, 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 something. And then all of a sudden in the background, Nicolae Ceaușescu is giving a speech, and all of a sudden you start hearing, jeering and screaming. And then he started slowing down, and he just looked up, just stunned that there were people jeering at him in the crowd. Mm-hmm. And that's when the revolution started.
Yeah.
So you didn't know the full story, probably.
Yeah, I didn't know that there was all of that background. I had an idea that what he was doing was oppressive, but not the entire meat of it. But you gotta fuck up really badly to get people to overthrow you that violently when every other Soviet country, I think Poland might have been I think Poland and the USSR were probably exceptions, but most of the Eastern Bloc countries had peaceful revolutions or at the very least I don't think anyone died. But in Romania, it got violent. Because and I think politically what's going on in this country, people are they're more inclined to wanting to openly agree with that type of violence, and usually people on the left, they make a distinction between punching up and punching down.
And here's another way to look at it. United Healthcare, it's how many people died under their watch? How many people died because they decided that they were going to deny healthcare? Brian Thompson, he creates an algorithm that indirectly causes the death of hundreds, if not thousands of people. He's not a murderer because he didn't whip out a knife and start stabbing somebody. So your hands are clean as long as you don't directly kill people yourself. That's like saying that John Gotti isn't responsible for anybody's death. And don't even get me started on George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And that's the double standard here, is that the government and powerful corporations can do whatever they want, and it's debatable as to whether the corporations control our government or if the government controls our corporations.
Yeah, it's a lot of lawfare involved for these powerful entities to pretty much maintain their monopoly of violence on society, and there's just, it depends on what the American people really want to do at the end of the day. Like these like lone wolf murderers, like that, I don't think that's going to be enough. And I'm personally still of the opinion that like much of America is still too lazy, or they want to do the catching up with the Joneses sort of ordeal. They don't want to put their lives on the line to really stick it to these higher ups in the upper echelons of society. And you also have certain people that are more than willing to actually state they have a political allegiance with the more corporate types and the higher ups, more affluent people of society anyway. So I still think we still have to make this sort of decision where it's like, even if people want revolution, what is that going to look like? And Slavoj Žižek, he said that like there was this sort of problem was present in V for Vendetta, and he would love to watch a V for Vendetta 2 where they overthrow like the oppressive system, and then they have to ask what comes next and how do you replace it, and how do you have it improve over what you've replaced it with. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I want to kind of address. Like, part of it is, on the one hand, and this is something that I addressed in my recent video about Luigi Mangione on my YouTube channel, is people, what it looks like is happening and is going to happen is, and this is just me being pessimistic, I hope that I'm pleasantly surprised, but people on the left like to make mean posts on the internet. People who are right-leaning who seem to support Luigi Mangione, like, they will get mad at Ben Shapiro, at Matt Walsh, but the way they get mad at them is not like, I realize that you're a piece of shit, I'm unsubscribing. It's more like, no, you don't get it, bro. Because the way they look at those political commentators is they think that they're having an uncharacteristically stupid take as opposed to it being an indicator of their actual allegiance. People like Ben Shapiro, people like Matt Walsh, they don't give a fuck about their audience if they're not wealthy. Like, I used to be in the Republican Party, and they were so delusional. They wanted to reach out to, like, they wanted to go into the wealthy neighborhoods and canvass there, and they would get kicked out all the time, and they're like, I don't understand, these are wealthy people, why don't they love us? And I'm like, because liberals go to college, liberals get degrees because they're not the ones who get kicked out. I mean, like, you get these liberal universities that are saying, yeah, no white men at all, only certain demographics allowed. And then guess who ends up running all the powerful businesses and corporations and then having all the money? But on the other hand, there's another thing that I wanted to address is just, let's say that this goes further than that. Let's say that, remember the riots and protests over George Floyd? Let's say that happens here in the United States, and let's say it goes beyond the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone back in 2020, which I would like to say, missed opportunity to call it the Capitol Hill Autonomous District. CHAD for short.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a revolution that actually goes much further than that. Let's say they do it Jan 6th, but this time they actually overthrow the government. What's going to replace what we have now? Because right now we're asking this question, because this has been a very eventful year. The Syrian, Bashar al-Assad's Syrian government got overthrown, and they're asking this right now. What direction are they going to take Syria in? Now, I hope that Syria becomes something like a republic, or if the different rebel groups work out their differences. But if I'm going to be completely honest, the result that I'm dreading is that Syria is going to either turn into Afghanistan under the Taliban, or it's going to turn into Libya, where the civil war continues. It's just that the faction that was previously in power is now out of the game. Like an RTS where one player gets knocked out.
Yeah, there's an entire power vacuum, and if I remember correctly, Assad, he's taking refuge in Russia right now, and I saw videos of the rebel forces just hanging out in his palace and seeing his cars and everything, and all of his cars were black and red, which was interesting to note. I guess he must like those colors, but I think that U.S. involvement in the Middle East has just made all sorts of issues for the people over there. And I think you're right, where it's on one hand we could have something like Afghanistan, or we could have something like Libya with unresolved power balances. And if something like that were to happen over here, I think it would be. I think you're gonna have more than just two big camps of how do we have a future for Americans, pretty much. The Democrats, I don't think they have a political, they fucked up so bad since Kamala Harris's, even Joe Biden, just his presidency was just an overall poster boy or poster child for the Democratic Party, and they were very much out of touch with your common American in so many ways. And that just reflected in Kamala Harris's campaign, and she Trump just beat her pretty much just outright when it came to the polls and everything. And we're supposed to expect that from that there's going to be a new type of front runner or a new type of political culture for the Democrats, and no one knows what that's going to look like. And I think that's because they don't have a plan for it. I mean, Trump has his 4 years, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that going into the future, I think that the Republican Party, I know Trump is a lot more mainstream now than years ago. If they can keep that type of momentum, you're just going to have a lot more Republican candidates for presidency, for office, whatever, that are going to be Trump adjacent. They have an idea of what to do for the foreseeable future, whereas the Democrats, they don't really have anything. We could even see from the fires that happened recently. It's just horrible mismanagement where they're trying to govern parts of the country. They had fire hydrants in LA they couldn't pull water from to put out the fires. There's that's going to make people extraordinarily despondent toward whatever promises you might have for them and whatever you intend to represent as your party. And I think there's a growing resentment against Democrats. They don't know how to deal with it. So I'm thinking they might have to split into different parties over it, or they're just going to have to accept that Republicans are going to have majority control of the government for foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, California is a dumpster fire. I mean, there was a court case where some man in Los Angeles was fighting a paternity fraud case, and even though he had to take the case to the Supreme Court because the city was explicitly biased against him. But more on that later. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are stupid. The Democrats, they kept trotting out a barely animated corpse to be their front runner. They sabotaged Bernie Sanders and everybody else. And I think the reason why they did it is because I kind of came up with a conspiracy theory that they wanted Joe Biden to be the president, and so that way they can make Kamala Harris the running mate, hoping Biden would die while in office, so that way they could have Kamala Harris be president without needing to win an election. That didn't happen. Yeah. And then Kamala Harris just became the presidential nominee after the Democrats forced Biden out of the forced him out of the race because of his horrible debate performance last year. Which the you want to know what, like, kills me is that Donald Trump has a tendency to interrupt his opponent when it's their turn to talk, and this time around, I think the Democrats managed to get the people that were running the debates to force Trump to shut up, and ultimately that actually sabotaged Biden, because he started like stuttering more than me. He couldn't answer questions properly. He would misspeak like crazy. And it was a perfect example of giving your enemy the Napoleon quote of "Don't interrupt your enemy when they're busy making a mistake." Just give it. Trump was forced to give Biden enough rope so he could hang himself.
Yeah.
And that cost Biden the nomination, because the Democrats, even Barack Obama, who was a strong supporter of Biden for a really long time, was one of the people forcing him out of the primary. And a lot of Democrats really liked Kamala Harris, and there's one thing about Kamala Harris that gave her an edge over Hillary Clinton, in my opinion. Hillary Clinton really aggressively pushed the "I'm a woman, you owe me" identity politics. Like, she really, like, she had like the "I'm with her" as a campaign slogan. To her credit, Kamala Harris didn't do any of that. But the problem with Kamala Harris is she had a really, really shady record as attorney general, or
I think she was a district attorney.
District attorney. And, like, she had an incredibly corrupt record. She was trying to keep people from getting out of prison because it was financially convenient to exploit them as slave labor. It's like, you want to talk about someone who's going to put you back in chains. Even if you were never in chains, she's going to put you in chains to start with.
Yeah.
Find something to throw you in prison for, and then they could use you as slave labor, which is a fucked up thing that still happens in this country. So, yeah, slavery was never abolished. It's just you need to find an excuse to do it now.
Yeah.
And to that end of things, I don't mean to go too far off topic. I want to return to what we're talking about, but good old Uncle Joe Biden pardoned a whole bunch of fucked up people, including one of the judges that was guilty for the Kids for Cash scandal. Do you remember that?
No.
Do you know what the Kids for Cash scandal is?
I have no idea. What is that?
Okay. I'm going to summarize this, but basically Kids for Cash, there were two judges in northeastern Pennsylvania. There would be these kids that would get like arrested for, like, they were accused of one crime or another, and these judges didn't care if they were innocent or not. They would slam them with a really heavy sentence, and then they have them get sent to private prisons. And it later came out that these private prisons bribed these judges to do this because the private prisons were profiting off their slave labor. By the way, I'm sorry.
That's a huge amount of corruption, and I'm not exactly sure how to solve that, because to me, a lot of people in civilization or civilized society pretty much, the price of having the state means you're going to have to put up with some level of corruption at some level. I don't think it's politically possible to have like a utopian society, and to me, like, utopian society would be a society without crime. When you're dealing with that level of corruption, a lot of it has to deal with incentives that people are getting for not having to uphold the law. And I remember, like, Nayib Bukele, he kind of tried to have like this anti-corruption stance on when he is in charge, or he has his power and control of his government.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to remember how exactly he would handle it. And if I remember correctly, he just flat out told everyone, like, if you're caught with corruption, like, where you're going to jail. But he made it like a whole spectacle where he had like everybody that was involved with his government was like in the same type of like parliamentary meeting place where they have their government at in El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he also brought out like his personal guard. I think they were like there too or whatever. And he had to use them as a means of intimidation against corrupt forces within the government.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, Nayib Bukele, he became like a big celebrity in the conservative movement, but in the right in general, I think, because it's like a lot of these like countries south of our border with Mexico are usually thought of as these like dystopian like hellholes in a sorry state, but and then you have this one fresh new face, this President Nayib Bukele, in a flash turn El Salvador into a paradise because he got rid of all the criminals by building a bunch of new prisons and just throwing them all away. And it's like, whoa. It's like he's the Hispanic guy that the Republicans like.
Yeah.
Which there's not many of them.
Yeah.
Except for Cubans. They like Cubans. Except for the ones running in Cuba. But yeah, like, oh, by the way, it's like, oh yeah, Kids for Cash. Oh yeah, Joe Biden pardoned the guy who was guilty for participating in the Kids for Cash scandal. By the way, we're not a banana republic because, well, it's not a banana republic when the USA does it.
Yeah, there's always like that double standard there, and who gets to decide when the law is legitimate and when it isn't on like the global stage.
You know who came up with American exceptionalism?
Like the term or just like the overall idea?
I think that I was under the impression it was Joseph Stalin that came up with it.
Okay.
The thing is that, and you know what, it's entirely possible that it started with Manifest Destiny, but I'm not a believer in American exceptionalism. The way I look at the United States is the reason I stay, like, there's two reasons why I stay in the United States instead of move to a different country. And this might change in a few days because, actually it could change tomorrow because tomorrow is when Trump gets inaugurated. The United States is not that special of a place to live. It's just that its laws are more tolerable to me than the laws of every other country. Like, let's say you take a Marxist-Leninist state like Vietnam. From what I've seen, it doesn't look like a hellhole, but porn's illegal there. And they've got other things that are illegal there where it's like, I don't think I could get used to some of these laws that easily. Like, if shit really hits the fan in this country and Trump and Elon Musk turn the United States into Boris Yeltsin's Russia, or even worse than that, then that's when I'll start thinking about buying a passport.
Yeah.
Let's see, what were we... I kind of forgot how we veered all the way into this topic, but I do kind of want to mention something else, which was this whole deal with the H-1b visas and Elon Musk in general. Yeah,
totally.
Elon...
that...
I'll let you finish, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was just like a really recent phenomenon with a lot of people on the right were kind of angry, or not even kind of, more like outraged, that we're supposed to have a lot more serious of a policy when it comes to immigration. And I think a lot of people that are signed on with Republicans, and they were very much pro-Trumpian in their approach to politics, they thought it was going to be like an America America First perspective that Trump was going to give for the second term, but allowing more of the H-1b visas to come through for workers to come into tech supposedly was the reason for not putting Americans first in this instance. So a lot of people were angry that their jobs were going toward other people that were not as invested in America as Americans themselves. And Elon Musk got a lot of flack for it because he needs people to work for him at his tech companies. And if you file for an H-1b, you can get into these companies, and yeah, he's going to be incentivized to allow for that. I think there's kind of a strange conflict going on where a lot of people were upset thinking that if these H-1b visa holders did not come into the country to become employed, that Americans could get these jobs. But I mean, they're not. You had people on Twitter saying the job would have been mine if it wasn't for the Indian that took it or whatever. But I don't think that's necessarily right. I mean, is competition really any like better if you're still losing in the end? Like, if let's say there were no H-1b program or whatever, and you still lose a job to another dude down the street from you, like, is that really any better? You're still losing in either scenario. So I think it's premature to think that you would just have the stuff just because like immigrants aren't allowed to have it or whatever. I'm not even a person that's like pro-immigration. I'm just trying to be honest, where it's like no amount of keeping immigrants out or in is going to allow the job market to be like less competitive. That's we don't live in a pre-outsourcing type of economics from like pre-Reagan. We just don't live in that.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I kind of see what you're saying, but on the other hand, I kind of disagree.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing: it's like, let's say you have like American citizens that want better like working conditions, and they're going on strike, or you get ones who just want better working conditions, or they're like shopping around for what would be a better place to work at. Instead of making like life less miserable for American workers, what Elon Musk is suggesting doing is going to people in India saying like, hey, you know how America is this land of opportunity? We know it's a thing that's true because it's a thing that people say. So if you sell your soul to me, then I'll get you in the United States and I'll have you work at my company. That way I don't have to make... That way I can underpay you, and I don't have to increase working conditions for American workers. And if anybody criticizes my plan, I'll just call them a racist. That's basically what's going on here.
Yeah, it's like a more internal means of outsourcing.
Because the thing about these H-1b workers, Elon Musk has their balls in a vice grip. If they leave his company, they demand, better working conditions, etc. Elon Musk can just have them deported. So they're basically almost like his slaves, just without, except he's got to pay them something. Because otherwise, why would they even work for him at all? Because I think that Indians are stupid than people who brainlessly repeat the line that the United States is the land of opportunity, and then they come here and then they're disappointed. Or idiots from Europe who go to the United States expecting to see like a county fair like out in the countryside, and so they go to New York City, specifically Manhattan, to look for it. I'm not saying Americans aren't stupid. I'm just saying that Europe has their fair share as well.
There's a lot of misguided expectations about the country, both like within it and from other people that might want to take up tourism here or immigrate here. And I just think it's absolutely crazy to me where like some people they immigrate here illegally, right? And they go through like absolutely just treacherous means of doing so, like life-threatening means, just so that they can have like more economic access to the US dollar, and they can still come over here and be immiserated. And it's just like, were you really better off leaving your country to come here? And there's just a lot of talk about immigration, especially with like I'm hearing that they're going to start ICE raids on like illegal immigrants in Chicago like this week, I think. So but like my big question to like, I have like two really big questions about the immigration debate. It's usually like, what do you do to the immigrants after you deport them? Like if you already deport them and they're willing to come over here illegally again, they can just come over here illegally again, like how they already illegally came over here the first time, right? And then like my second question would be like, I'm hearing a lot of people on the right say we need to like lock down our border, but it's like, what does that mean? Like, do you want like a Berlin Wall style concrete barricaded structure with like automated turrets every 100 feet going from like California all the way up to pretty much like the Gulf of Mexico?
They do.
Like, I'm not saying that's like necessarily bad. I'm just saying like, and anything short of that, I don't really take the criticism seriously.
Well,
because that's what you would have to do.
You know what they basically did is that Trump spent like so much time talking about building a wall, build the 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 wall, and then when people were taking pictures of the border fence, it's the border fence from the Secure Fence Act of 2006, which,
yeah,
you know who voted in favor of that? Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what, and by the way, that was what Trump meant when he said that Hillary Clinton was for the wall. And then, like, John Oliver, after pointing out that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama voted in favor of it, John Oliver said, no, she wasn't. That's BS. Something to that effect. It's like, okay, you're a hack, you limey version of Steve Mnuchin.
Yeah.
Seriously, he looks like John Oliver looks like an evil version of Steve Mnuchin, or maybe I don't know who is the evil twin. One's American, the other one's a Brit.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like I went off on a tangent there.
But no, it's fine. And like, I also wanted to add a bit to Kamala Harris and her campaign, where like, I think that she didn't have to run as hard on like trying to say men like owed her like how Hillary Clinton did, but because that was already there like as an undertone of like a mainline issue of the Democrats because of the whole unconstitutionality of abortion at the federal level and striking down Roe v. Wade and everything. So like to someone that's like a Democrat, they just take that as prima facie, or they take it as just a rote assumption that they already have when they get into politics. So they didn't have to run that much into there.
Yeah.
But it's clear to me like they just don't really care about men's issues. I mean, I don't think the Republicans are really that much better, but I think that the Democrats are just a lot more brazen about it, and it's really obvious that they care way more about women's issues over men. So of course, like, vast majority of men, like, I just don't think she was going to get the male vote at all. And it looks like this in the poll numbers, where most young men, they tended to vote for Trump.
Yeah, and the way I look at it, like, from my perspective, and probably your perspective, American politics, at least the political parties who actually have clandestine power, it's like Warhammer 40,000. Everybody's the villain. Like,
totally.
Both main parties are the villain. The Democrats, like, they hate men. They were the reason why Facebook and Instagram, well, I don't know about Facebook, but definitely Instagram was like run by misandrists, and apparently the Democrats were behind it. And now the only reason why they're going the other way is the Democrats are no longer going to be in a position of power to blackmail Mark Zuckerberg into submission, because a lot of people shit on Mark Zuckerberg, but let's be real, if the government wants to blackmail you or frame you for a crime that you didn't commit, they can. They've done it before to other people. like I can't tell you
Yeah.
how many instances of social activists where all of a sudden the police found a computer full of child porn in their house, some of whom never even owned a computer before. So I can understand why Zuckerberg flip-flopped. I'm not going to go all hog wild on him. But back to the issue of the campaign and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris herself, like, I didn't really hear a whole lot of, like, sex war, like, stuff out of her. And to me, that was really smart, but I think also it's... I don't even mean this as an insult, but Kamala Harris was just kind of vapid and empty throughout the campaign. Like, she clearly didn't seem to be all that sharp when it came to foreign policy, like what was going on with Ukraine. Like, I don't think she really said the right things in terms of foreign policy. As for abortion, like, I would get into arguments with some, like, Trumpers, and it's like, I can't understand why anybody would vote for Kamala Harris or not vote for Trump. And it's like, there are people that care about their reproductive rights, particularly women, and they had a clear choice. Even if Donald Trump himself isn't, like, super gung-ho about restricting reproductive rights, which Project 2025 is going to ban more than just abortion, just so you know. They had a clear choice to vote for Kamala Harris. It's not that Kamala Harris was a decent candidate. It's just to stop Project 2025. It failed, but you gotta admit it was understandable why they would vote for Kamala Harris. And now that Trump's going to be in office, it's looking like that Project 2025 shit could happen. That part of it is like a plan to have people go into various parts of the government and social, like, organizations to turn the United States into the Fourth Reich. So, because, yeah, I can understand you might not care about abortion, but do you want the government to start saying, like, okay, you're not allowed to watch porn anymore. We're gonna start, like, using the NSA on you, and oh, you're single? Oh, you don't have a girlfriend? Oh, you're not married? You don't have any children? Well, we're going to start either levying fines against you for it or go even further than that. That's the spirit of the GOP right now. So I can understand people being pissed off at the Democratic Party, but giving the GOP a pass is, in my opinion, utterly stupid. Unless you want to be forced to have, like, kids against your will, which maybe this is just me catastrophizing, but it's a prediction that I'm having that's where we're going, because people were gaslighting Democrats, like, or people, like, concerned about the abortion stuff, like, oh, you're exaggerating, you're overreacting, there's not going to be a ban of abortion. And then after the election over, they're like, psych, we're going to take it away from you.
Yeah, I think there's just different motives at play with how, like, people want to use the government in the United States. It's not even... I'm a bit more pessimistic on what the goal of the government was supposed to be. It was supposed to have, like, a checks and balances system between three parts of the state, but now it just looks like it's devolved into whichever political party can use the state or the monopoly of violence as a cudgel to get whatever stupid, like, utopian idea they want
100%.
out of this country. And a part of that would, like, I can't even side with Democrats really on the porn issue, because if like, gynocrats on that particular side of the political spectrum, like, if they're able to have their way, they wouldn't want men to watch porn or whatever, because, like, they would believe that porn hurts women, and that's just anything that's against whatever women want. They want to ban it or get rid of it too. So I'm not exactly sure on why I would think that, like, they have a worse position than Project 2025 when it would come to porn, because, like, from my perspective, they would both just be my enemy. And like you put it perfectly with, like, the Warhammer analogy, even though I am sympathetic to the Emperor, it's probably my favorite faction. But I can definitely see why people wouldn't like any of the factions in Warhammer.
The Tau, I don't mean to interrupt, but the Tau used to be the good guys, and then a bunch of like Imperium fans threw a temper tantrum, and so the Games Workshop had to evil them up a bit by making it having the Ethereals mind control everybody. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think when I was younger and first exposed to Warhammer, I liked the Tau also. But as I got older, I started liking the Imperium more for like aesthetics and like in Fallout, I'm like a huge Brotherhood of Steel like fan. That's like my favorite faction, and the Empire in Warhammer kind of reminds me of them. They're like the big brother of the Brotherhood. That's how I would see it, and it's just like people that just like free expression, or they like to experience art, and they don't like they're just really introverted people. For a lot of us, like we just don't like having to go out and socialize that much. I've just always been like that, and these types of policies, whether it's from the gynocratic left Democrats or it's like the gynocentric like right, they just do not like people. They have their own different reasons for why they don't like porn and why they'd want to ban it. And this is actually coming out in the cultural war with Goonergate and the upcoming discourse concerning video games, where we're having more conservative people and audiences that like gaming saying they don't want like half naked chicks in their games anymore. And this is coming after pretty much. It's debatable if the woke stuff is like outside of games or not. Now we're in like this weird spot where it's like, do companies view woke as being financially profitable for gaming now or not? And you're going to find people saying no, and you'll find people saying yes. But you have like this type of more middle path or centrist view on it, which is kind of like what I have, which is people should just be able to make whatever games they want for whatever audiences that they might want to advertise to or have engaged with their games or whatever. And the woke crowd, they didn't like some of the tropes that were very popular amongst gamers, such as myself, such as like attractive female characters in games. And one of the go-to like poster boys or poster childs for the woke games would be Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which came out I think in October last year, and it performed abysmally. It didn't sell worth a shit. People were criticizing it from its art direction, how uncompelling the characters are, how the story deviates too much from the original Dragon Age games, and I think all of those criticisms are pretty much valid, and I probably agree. But it still remains to be seen if woke stuff in games is still viable or not. And for me, I don't even want BioWare to be a company anymore, because they've just gone and separated themselves so much from what I used to play from BioWare titles. And apparently the staff are working on the new Mass Effect game, and I don't even want a new Mass Effect game because they screwed up the last Mass Effect game, and they haven't given us really a good reason to think that we can be confident in them in the future to make a better title. And if the woke stuff is still around, then they'll still try to like sneak in ugly characters for people to play as, yet no one wants to play that. So that's like from like the left woke angle. But like what's going on with the right now is because they're emboldened by a Trumpian base that's like arguably extremely Christian for whatever reason. They don't want, they view like nudity and stuff as sinful and degenerate, and they don't like it. So they want to ban it, and they don't want video games to capitulate to an audience like me.
Yeah.
So we're right back where we started with porn, where it's like I have two sides that are just my enemy. So
yeah. I mean, do you remember the original Gamergate? Were you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I remember when Gamergate first happened back in 2014. Actually, I didn't hear about it when it started. I heard about it when I was in my second semester in community college, way back in sometime in 2000, like sometime in early 2015. Now, when I first heard like people talking about Gamergate, at first the first assumption that I had was that they were referring to Doritos Gate, which happened like 3 years prior.
Yeah,
but
I remember that one too.
You remember Doritos Gate? Okay, so I don't.
Yeah. Dorito Pope. Yeah.
I didn't actually learn about that until like 2015. So, and I looked into that one. It's like, yeah, I mean, I kind of knew that a lot of these like video game journalists were corrupt pieces of shit. And the funny thing is, Gamergate actually started that way too. Is it was about corruption in video game journalism.
Yeah.
And it snowballed from there because the journalists in question had ties to feminists in academia, and that was apparently criticizing feminists in academia is like punching a hornet's nest. You're gonna incite the mob to come after you, and unlike any time before, the conservative movement sided with the Gamergaters. Now, the Gamergaters were not all like alt-righters. They were also, you also had leftists in there. Sargon of Akkad was a big name in the Gamergate thing, and then there's other people like Thunderfoot and Mr. Mediker. Thunderfoot was known, he cut his teeth as like an atheist who put out a lot of videos like talking about religion, and Thunderfoot and this Christian gamer, Shock of God, they would go back and forth about creationism. Now, I didn't really pay attention to a lot of that. I just kind of skimmed over the history of it before Gamergate actually started. And the thing about the Gamergate stuff, conservatives didn't side with the Gamergaters because they felt bad for them. The dollar sign started showing up in their eyes. They were shitting on gamers before Gamergate, most notably Milo Yiannopoulos, or Yiannopoulos. I've always pronounced his name Yiannopoulos because I just think of Minneapolis, and it just looks similar to me, so I just keep calling him Minneapolis. Maybe that's a good nickname for him. Anyway, Milo does a 180 because he was shitting on gamers before Gamergate, and then all of a sudden he's like, and he was saying like a lot of typical Republican conservative stuff about gamers, and then all of a sudden he's sympathetic to the Gamergaters being their torchbearer. It's like another Napoleon quote: "Show me where my men are marching so I can lead them there," and that's exactly what he did. And I gotta say, he even admitted to it when he was being interviewed by David Pakman, which I think that video is still on YouTube. But there was 2015 and 2016 was like a turning point where a lot of people that either had progressive or even left-wing politics shifted towards the right. And this is somewhat of a self-report, but I was actually one of those people. Like in 2000, from 2012 to 2014, I would say I was actually quite progressive. I had a lot of progressive politics. The only political position that was progressive that I did not have was, well, aside from being a men's rights activist at heart, was I was never sympathetic to the Democrats' arguments about firearms. Their argument, you shouldn't be allowed to have firearms. If you want protection, just rely on the police. This is before, this is an argument they commonly relied on before Michael Brown got shot and all the other, and the BLM movement just erupted.
Yeah.
But Democrat hypocrisy aside, people like Ben Shapiro just came into prominence. And before 2015, I think prior to 2016, I used to watch the Young Turks. I started watching them around the time that Fred Phelps died. And I saw the American flag in their background, and I thought that they were like a conservative group, only to find out, no, you can have progressives that, use the American flag in their iconography. But it's gotten to be a lot more rare because ever since like the progressives have really gotten aggressive with the anti-American demonstrations, the Westboro Baptist Church basically got put out of a job.
Oh yeah.
Like, the Westboro Baptist Church used to be the most controversial thing in this country back in the 2000s, and then the woke SJWs outshined them, and now they're like, well, shit, they stole our thunder. We can't outshine them anymore. And Shirley Phillips Roper used the excuse of, well, that job, spreading the message is already done. Everybody knows what our message is now, but I'm not convinced. Nah, they stole your thunder and you can't do anything about it. That's the real reason why you stopped doing your pickets.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me politically, like, it wasn't, I don't think my story is really all that different from yours. Like, when I was in college, like, my sophomore year, I think, was when I started getting into more like Gamergate stuff. And actually, I used to watch like a lot of the like atheism versus Christianity or theism debates back when I graduated high school up until when I was in college, and I took like my philosophy of religion courses and got my degree and everything. But like I got into Gamergate pretty much from watching like Thunderfoot debate, like you said, Shock of God, and I'd also watch like The Amazing Atheist have these like discussions or debates with like Venom Thing X. He was like a Christian YouTuber at the time. This is like really fucking old stuff. And I also would watch Sargon of Akkad because he was in the atheism sphere. He's still an atheist still, even though he politically had to change to be a lot more right wing in England. But he would like debate. It was like the skeptic rationalism like sphere of the internet. And like what happened was there was like this internal divide in the atheist like online discussion forums and YouTube comments, and it was called Atheism Plus.
Yep.
And that's where all the feminism and like caring about race issues and all this other shit, like for whatever reason, a bunch of people decided that had to deal with the philosophy of religion debates about if God existed, if we had good reasons for believing it or whatever.
Yeah.
And
like you can be an atheist and not be a progressive, but you can also be an atheist and also want social justice. The problem with these progressives is they don't want justice. They're black supremacists. They hate white people. They hate white men. They hate men in general. Hypothetically, if they got rid of all of us white men, I don't know what race you are, black men will be next on the chopping block. Because here's the thing, it's like as a men's rights activist, like it's frustrating to me all the shit that like men have to, like we are kind of like we are on the chopping block for like a lot of inequality, such as like fighting out in public, prison violence, etc. Fraternity fraud, not being taken seriously when it comes to stuff like that. Well, black men get it way worse disproportionately. So it's like largely because they're just perceived more negatively in general. And maybe there are a lot of black men out there who are bad people, but I don't think that's not a justification for like racial profiling. Because if we're going to say racial profiling is justified, the way Blonde in the Belly of the Beast and her sidekick, whatever his name was, I think it was Beauty and the Beta. I don't remember what that's the actual name of their show. They brought on this guy, I think his name is Spinosauruskin, David Sherratt. He used to be MGTOW and then he turned against it. They brought him on their show, and David Sherratt said something to the effect of like, well, just because somebody has brown skin doesn't mean you can just say that they're a Muslim. And they retorted to that with something to the effect of, no, it is justified to profile brown people as being Muslims and then discriminating against them because of that. It's like, oh, okay, and I was like, oh, these people are racist. Okay, turn off the stream.
Yeah, I remember David Sherratt. I didn't know he was MGTOW. I always thought that like he participated like in the manosphere a little bit, or he was like sympathetic to certain types of positions or whatever. But I didn't know that's like what happened with him. And like I remember like Thunderfoot, it was like the weirdest thing that happened with Thunderfoot. Like he went from criticizing creationism and Christianity to like he would just continuously make these videos about Anita Sarkeesian and just like rip her to shreds on her feminism and approach to like video games and everything. Mm-hmm. And this was interesting because this stuff started happening at a time when I was in my like anthropology courses.
Yeah.
And my professor, she's a really nice lady, but she wanted to introduce feminist topics through gaming, and she presented us with feminist frequency. My jaw dropped to the floor, and I was like, what's going on online is following me in academia. Yeah. What the hell is going on here? So I pretty much, that kind of made me see what was going on here and how academia has influence on media, and how media also needs like what they come up with in these like obscure academic journals in order to critique culture. So you get the woke shit. And I was like, I can't participate in a system like this. So I was like, I'll just get my degree and I'm not going to participate in any more internships, and I'm not going to seek like go into a master's track or a PhD program or anything. If the culture is going to be like that, I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, like basically my advice my strategy and my advice to anybody watching this who hasn't finished college yet: if you're in college and you're like trying to get a degree just so you can get a better job, just try to be like an imposter from Among Us and keep it a secret what your politics are, if you can. Like, because your goal in there is not to destroy the feminazis. Your goal is to get the proof that you can do the work that you're trying to aim for, and wait until after you get your degree or certificate before you go hog wild. Because I put up with some shit when I was in college, but it wasn't in I actually had a sociology class, but nothing crazy happened in that particular class. It was actually an economics class where I found feminazis.
Wow.
Yeah, no. Like, I had a sociology class. The subject matter, the textbook we were using was like really feminazi, but it was also written in 2015, and we were using it in early 2016. But to her credit, my professor was very neutral, very nice person, was not interested in taking a particular side, but she, taught the subject matter that she was required to teach. And you could make the argument that there was like a somewhat if she had a left-wing bent, it was more in economics, which is more understandable. Like the thing that she ragged on about was something that I would agree with, and I would imagine most of my audience would agree with, is that when AIG got bailed out in 2008, AIG gave huge bonuses to their executives who were responsible for causing the economic crisis in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's like, even if you're right wing, you gotta be a real ass licker to defend AIG for that. So, Rush Limp balls can burn in hell.
Yeah, it's for me, like, the feminism was always just it depends on what fields you're going to study, which is why I was surprised you found out about it in economics, because for me it was more in my sociology courses and my anthropology courses that I ran into that sort of stuff. Even in history courses, it's there. I remember I was in one of my Chinese history classes, and there was a girl studying Chinese history for a PhD, and she was talking about male gaze in some ancient like emperor's tome or something, and I was just like, it's just there.
Yeah.
And there isn't really much of an opposing view for like men's rights or men's issues to take on as much of a popular frame of reference as feminism in universities, because like you're right, like universities, vast majority of them are liberal. Like conservative universities, most people just don't go to those.
Well,
they go to the more liberal ones.
You wouldn't want to go to a conservative university either, because remember how we were talking about how both Democrats and Republicans are the bad guy? If you go to like Liberty University, okay, you're not allowed to be a gamer. You're not allowed to, like, it's one thing if you're saying don't do it in the college. Like, obviously, I don't think that even like other like non-political or liberal colleges would allow you to do this kind of stuff on campus. But if they're saying like, if they find out that you're a gamer or you are engaging in sexual infidelity outside of college, then they kick you out or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, how are you any better than the liberal universities? It's like, choose your tyrant.
Yeah.
It's like Warhammer 40,000. It's like, okay, the Imperial cult isn't all that in a bag of chips, but I don't think worshiping chaos is that great of an alternative.
Yeah.
And I say that as a chaos player.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm just like the whole thing, and we have like Razorfist, and that's how I found out about Razorfist too. Was from GamerGate, because he made some reviews, I think, about Mass Effect 3, and then later about Fallout 4, and I found about him from The Amazing Atheist. He actually recommended his channel years ago, and I remembered watching some of his stuff. And some of Razorfist's takes I agree with, and then the most recent one I think is just fucking stupid. And I don't know why people are doing this like Christian virtue signal-y thing with like, pay attention to me, I'm holier than thou, and all this gooning in the games with like the titties and the asses is degenerate, and we have to like get rid of it. And there's this, a
lot of these like born again Christians who are, I mean, this born again Christian shit's not new. It's just that instead of being Protestants, a lot of them are doing it as like Orthodox, either Greek Orthodox or Russian Orthodox or some form of Orthodox, or they do it as like trad Caths in the case of Nick Fuentes before he got exposed as being in the closet a gay Nazi. But back in 2018, he was convincing people that he was a traditionalist conservative Catholic. Okay, I think he got excommunicated for anti-Semitism. Because even though the Roman Catholic Church wasn't all that great towards Jews back in the Middle Ages, the modern Roman Catholic Church doesn't really want to continue that embarrassing part of history.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, even if you are an anti-Semite, you want to keep that on the down low. And I'm not saying that as an anti-Semite, I'm just saying like Commander Weems from MASH pretended not to be racist because as soon as he was exposed, he almost got court-martialed for it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I kind of forgot. Oh yeah, Razorfist. I actually first found out about that guy by watching Steven Crowder, because after I stopped watching TYT back in 2016, I don't remember what led up to this, but I started watching Steven Crowder, and I abandoned TYT and I started watching Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, and Milo Yiannopoulos. Because Milo Yiannopoulos, even if he is a dishonest hack, he did say a lot of the right things. Like, and maybe his motivations were not genuine. Maybe he was, motivated by just like licking his finger and sticking it in the air and see which way the wind was blowing. But I also got to give him credit if he happens to say a lot of profound things, which during that time he was.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't take him seriously anymore. I mean, like, He's not relevant anymore. Time to go straight in order to trigger the libs. It's like, all right. He stopped dyeing his hair bleach blonde, and now it's black again, which is his natural hair color. But, Steven Crowder, I used to watch him, and that's how I know about Razorfist. I don't know a whole lot about Razorfist other than that I watched The Amazing Atheist officiate a debate between him and Kyle Kalinske, and this is back in the day where I thought that debate was like really cool to watch, because like I used to have a lack of self-awareness, and I would put so much like I would almost like identify with political commentators like Kyle Kalinske or Ben Shapiro, and it's like, oh man, I want to see this person debate this person because I want to see like how this person reacts to these ideas. And at some point, I realized the problem with debate is that the way a debate is it's not so much two people having a discussion where they learn from each other and bat ideas off of each other, but it's like it's this person versus this person. It's a death battle of ideas. And what happens if one person basically wins the debate? The other person has to make it look like they're not losing. They'll be like, no, I have to disagree with you because that's the format of the thing that we're doing. So and when I realized that, that's when I stopped paying attention to debates. But seeing Kyle Kalinske debate Razorfist is how I know about Razorfist. Other than that, I didn't know much about him. But Gamergate, you could say there's a split in the right, where you have the libertarian right who likes the fan service versus like the authoritarian right, which wants to ban all that shit for being degenerate and not their version of Christianity or whatever other cult they're trying to sell us nowadays. I think that divide was always there. They kind of put aside their differences because during that time, just because the Anita Sarkeesian and her allies were the bigger threat at the time. But then after Trump won the election, that threat kind of faded away, and their differences between each other became more apparent because, yes, Trump won the election, but then I think starting in 2017, a lot of the right-wing alliance already started crumbling. Like you had people like Richard Spencer going out and basically kind of proving that the alt-right was largely populated by neo-Nazis, and then it created a difference between the alt-right and the alt-light. I think alt-right to a lot of people meant just people that are burned by feminazis who are not conservatives. In other words, they're not like, they don't toe the line of the GOP, because you got places like Conservapedia that say, well, in order to be a conservative, you have to check off every box, and if you fail to tick off a single box, then you're an evil commie liberal, Obama-loving piece of shit that deserves a frost at the mouth.
Yeah.
Because like we talk about liberals doing that, and they definitely do. They did it to Lacey Green, but I've seen Republicans do it too. They've done it to me. I used to be in local politics. They did it to me. I know that Republicans are just as bad in that regard. I think it's probably an exertion of power, honestly. But over time, the Republicans they exerted their influence over the right wing. It's like, okay, well, now that the progressives are out of the picture, okay, we don't want you doing this anymore. They incrementally pressured them away from the degenerate stuff. And I think that the alt-right, like the Richard Spencer types, had a hand in it, because recently I watched a debate between Richard Spencer and Jason Unruh that happened like 3 or 4 years ago. And Richard Spencer has those same political positions, is that Richard Spencer is dumb enough to be an open white nationalist. And
I remember that debate. I watched it when it happened, and if I remember correctly, like Richard Spencer, he kind of got Unruh on like a gotcha where it was like, what was it? It was something like should some country be able to like hold its own citizens against its will and make sure that they can't escape or something like that? And Unruh said no, and Richard Spencer pretty much just said, you have like a contradiction in your reasoning here, pretty much. It was something like that.
Yeah, I'd have to listen to that again. I was listening to that debate while I was working on my miniatures. The thing that stuck out to me the most in that discussion was like, and this is something that neo-Nazis and white nationalists and alt-righters and generals do, is they'll have discussions with leftists like Jason Unruh, like, and part of it is to show like, hey, like progressives, like they'll do to you what they did to Lacey Green. We're willing to have discussions with you, but then they'll also try to peer pressure you into adopting white nationalism and white supremacism. And they tried doing it to Jason Unruh, and Jason Unruh stuck to his guns. And you could hear the frustration in their voices. They're like Richard Spencer just like threw his arms up in frustration, and they're like, "Come on," because they were trying to adopt. I don't remember exactly what was said, but they were trying to get him to adopt some like well-known like white nationalist or white supremacist positions. But Jason Unruh didn't fall for it because, well, he's smarter than Dave Rubin.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not Dave Rubin, maybe like Sargon of Akkad, because I think that's what happened with Sargon of Akkad is he wasn't always this extreme. He started out as an anti-feminist atheist, and you had leftists like Kyle Kulinski reach out to him and talk to him, and they had a few discussions between 2014 and 2017, and if the first few discussions, Sargon of Akkad had some pretty left-wing political positions. He said that a country, like a system that creates billionaires, is a bad system. That's a very socialist thing to say, not a conservative position.
Yeah.
Now, since Sargon of Akkad, unlike Kyle Kulinski, has since shifted since that discussion, whereas Kyle Kulinski has pretty much stayed the same as he was back then. I think the thing that got Sargon to shift was his audience, probably, and maybe the people he was hanging around. Some people are more easy to influence, whether they're JonTron or Joe Rogan in that fashion, but you do have people like Jason Unruh. I think part of it is also social skills, because I used to be very easily manipulated by other people, and I think like my experience just experiencing living in society over the past, I would say, 8 years has taught me a lot, and I'm a lot more resistant to certain influences now. Some of it is learning trial by error, and other is like some people like teaching me and like what to look out for and stuff. And some of this stuff is stuff that I wish my teachers and parents had taught me, but obviously they didn't want me to learn that stuff because they were doing the same gaslighting. But yeah, I mean, that sort of thing is a power differential, kind of like the stuff that we were talking about at the beginning of the discussion about Luigi Mangione and the healthcare thing. Oh, there is a point that I kind of wanted to point out when it came to the video that I made recently. And I'm just going to reiterate a point that I made. The reason why I don't think much is going to happen, if there's no revolution or revolt or anything, a big part of it is that the government, the political commentators, and the health insurance companies are smart enough to not give a speech like the one that Hopper gave to the ants, where he tells them, like, after Flick's bird trick failed, Hopper beats the crap out of the main character, Flick, and tells all the ants, ideas are very dangerous things. You are worthless, soil-digging losers that put on this earth just to serve us. Like, could you imagine if like Trump gave a speech to his supporters saying like, yeah, I won 2 times in a row. I don't need you anymore. You exist to do my bidding. Or if not Trump, like let's say the health insurance companies or government officials. Could you imagine what kind of revolt they would whip up if they said that?
Yeah, it'd be riots like all over the country, and they would be targeting like the places of business where the healthcare companies need to keep extracting profits and keeping people employed and stuff. It might even have people just resigning from working for those companies if they did anything like that.
Where's an Alpha Legion agent when you need them? To to impersonate a government official and have them give that speech. So that way it happens.
Yeah.
But part of what I'm pointing to is I mentioned Nick Fuentes earlier in the discussion. I'm sure you've heard of after Trump won the election, Nick Fuentes gave the "Your Body, My Choice" speech on his.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But you know what that points to? You know what that shows? John, I'm going to quote John Oliver here. If you want to do something evil, put it in something boring. Paul Ryan, around 2012, pushed, well, he co-sponsored, but I don't remember who it was who actually came up with this bill. Someone came up with a bill to try to make it so that rapists can sue women who they raped if that woman tries to pursue an abortion for a baby they don't want. Try to make that a law, and all that got is a few news articles. Nick Fuentes just says something really stupid, and he's got feminazi stalkers like showing up to his house to harass or even attack him. So saying things... The point I'm trying to make is saying things is worse than passing laws that oppress people.
Yeah.
This is why people say Americans are stupid.
Yeah, it's the lawmakers that it's at least with our society, it's probably like pretty much any society that has to abide by a type of constitutionalism. There's a type of understanding that lawmakers and those that enforce the laws have, that people that are outside of that process don't get to participate. And like the thing with Nick Fuentes, like a dude showed up to his house to try to kill him. Like he showed up with like a gun and a crossbow, and the police just killed him because he committed like 2 or 3 other homicides before he showed up to Nick Fuentes' house. And a lot of people were just, like liberals. We already knew they were going to be fucking angry if Trump won. And oh well, like when Trump won the first time, they were fucking angry. We already knew that. And then this time, they were also really angry as well. And because the abortion like issue was pretty much decided as being unconstitutional, they probably just saw him as like throwing salt upon the wound, and they wanted to take out their frustration with the GOP out on him, which is weird because we have Fuentes being very critical of Trump and his positions on Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like the Groypers, they have like their own sort of political affiliation, and they just don't really care about what mainstream GOP wants, and they sure as hell don't like liberals and people that just don't fit in with their politics. And there's like troll armies and all sorts of stuff that are interconnected on the internet to try to like silence people and dox people and all sorts of nasty stuff.
Yeah, I think maybe this is just me overestimating my enemies, but I think that a big part of it is the feminazis want to keep their critics in line, or keep people that say things that they don't like in line. So it's like, don't voice opinions or don't say things that we don't like, or something bad's going to happen to you. That's one thing that I miss about the Westboro Baptist Church, is that I think they were part of the reason why we had an era where you could voice your opinion and people couldn't really get away with like censoring you with violence, which is pretty much I can't even say it's unconstitutional, because what the Constitution actually says is that Congress is not allowed to pass a law that bans free speech. But the Supreme Court has kind of expanded that a little bit, because like what happens if the president tries to pass an executive order saying like, non-denominational fundamentalist Protestant Christianity is the state religion of the United States now. So if you're of any other denomination or of any other religion or an atheist, you can get fucked.
Like there's that entire type of issue between the executive branch and like the judicial branch, and like this goes back to other types of precedents in the country where you have the Supreme Court like trying to pass a type of legislation or a type of law, and I forgot what president said it, but they said something to the effect of the Supreme Court can try to pass a law, but can they enforce it? So like if those that enforce the laws don't care about whatever a lawmaker decides to push as legislation, it doesn't mean anything. It might as well just be me writing on like a used napkin about how much of the emperor of the universe I am. Like it's just not going to work.
Yeah, well, that was something that Legal Eagle brought up, because he made a video about TikTok getting banned, and near the end of his video, he mentioned how Donald Trump declared that even if they try to ban TikTok, that he's just going to circumvent the ban by not enforcing it, which is not something that Trump is allowed to do. I'm pretty sure that he could probably get in more trouble. Like, I think that Trump is probably like high off of getting away with inciting an insurrection and all the other crimes he got found for, and so now he feels like he can just get away with anything. So this is going to be a very chaotic presidency, I predict. I don't even know if we're going to be living through it. This could be like the very last election ever on planet Earth.
We'll see. It's there's a lot of uncertainty, because
on the one hand, like the first time Trump was president, I kind of was expecting the institutions to hamper his worst tendencies, but the GOP is moving a lot of people into positions of power to really fuck up this country, and I'm pretty worried about it. And they seem a lot nastier this time around. I don't maybe I wasn't paying as much attention in 2016, but in 2016 they didn't seem anywhere near this evil, especially with people like Elon Musk, who's going to basically run the country or have a big hand in running the country, which, considering how his shitty attitude towards unions, has me very pessimistic about this country's future. I'm like half wondering if I should spend the money on buying a passport and start learning another language.
Well, I don't think it's not. I would definitely buy a passport. I don't know how much, like, how you're doing economically, but for me, when I got my passport, it was very easy. It didn't really cost that much. It's about $200, and then you wait about 3-ish weeks, and they ship it to you in the mail. And there are places on the planet where you can get by without having to know that much that much of the native language. You can know English, like Thailand, the Philippines. Like, the dollar is really strong in those two countries, and there's a lot of expat communities. So if you ever wanted to leave, like, you totally go there. And if you can find like a remote job, you're set.
Yeah.
So you'll be doing, like, the amount of money needed to live in like a 1-bedroom, pay rent for yourself in America is like 2 or 3 times what you could just live off of in those other countries. Like, I would definitely say, if you're like a young man, that, like, if I were to do it over again, would I go to college again? Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. My mother says that, like, I still did the right thing by going to college and finishing getting my degree.
Yeah. Maybe
she's right. I guess she's right. Like, I did get promoted when I was at work, and I think my degree did have something to do with that. But like, if you like just graduated from high school, or you're in your early 20s, like, I would consider working part-time, if you can get a gaming PC, build one, buy a laptop, whatever, and then go on Indeed and just start looking for work from home jobs.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of them on there.
Well,
Yeah.
I did not just get out of high school. I'm going back to college for education that's actually going to tangibly help me. Because when I jumped into college right out of high school back in 2014, I had no clue what I was doing. I was just responding to pressure from my teachers and parents, and so I went for a liberal arts, because that was what the useless guidance counselors shunted me into. And that didn't do jack shit. So now I'm going back to college, but now I'm going to go for something that's actually related to something that I actually care about. And I'm doing a lot better this time around because the classes, I actually enjoy doing them. It's not just... I mean, some of the classes the first time around I liked. Like, I liked world literature, but it's not really gonna... it's not something that I can really put on a resume for what I'm trying to go for.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, for me, like, there's a couple reasons why I don't want to go back. One of them I already referenced before, where it's like the college culture is just, I'm not there. And then student loans. I repaid my student loans last year. I'm debt free, thank goodness, and I really don't want to go back into anything like that.
Yeah.
So
the way I look at college is it's shit as job training, but you need it to prove to a potential employer that you know how to do the work. It's like, look, here's my fucking medal. Hire me, bitch.
Yeah.
And that's because it's very difficult right now, because like the past year, it's like I can't tell you how many people I ran into who were also out of work, who were all getting the, yeah, sorry, you don't have 15 years of we want somebody for this entry level job. We're going to pay them minimum wage, but if you don't have like 3 to 5 years of experience and a bachelor's degree, then we're not going to let you in. Does that sound realistic? Does that sound like a realistic expectation? It's like, and then these people say nobody wants to work anymore.
Yeah, I've been watching this YouTube channel called The Philosophical Gamer, and he goes through this entire like flowchart and tier list about like what you can do after you graduate from high school or college as a young man. And he's just saying like these employers pay dog shit wages, and we're living in a time for a lot of people. It takes like the amount of work that you're putting in for your employer and the amount that you get paid doesn't match up with the cost of living like at all. So you're actually paying more money to work than what your employer is actually providing you for when you actually show up to work anyway. And he had like this whole tier list about like what you can do. And one of them was like getting a passport and moving abroad and doing like remote work. And then they had also other solutions like going to volunteering agencies that are in other countries where they pay for your room and board, and you just help at like youth hostels. That was like an option. There's other options where you can try to buy some land or whatever and just be a rough survivalist, try to cut down a bunch of your costs as much as possible. That was like one of my plans was to do like a hybrid sort of move where I would buy my own land and then I would get like a tiny home, and then I could like dramatically cut down my costs per month. But a lot of these moves are just not popular in current American culture. Like American culture like wants you to be a hyper consuming like slop snorting moron that just goes and needs to keep up with the Joneses so that you don't think you're a loser to your parents. And that's like one of the two big factors for why I think men participate in the economy, other than, well, they need to survive and eat and stuff, would be social pressure. Like they don't want to look like losers in front of their peers and family, and sex. They want to try to find a place that they can cohabitate with women to start a family or date or whatever.
Hustle culture.
And also what?
Hustle culture.
Hustle culture, yeah. So if I'm just speaking as a man and how I empathize with other men and how what their motivations are for working, because like I found myself in that majority of people where I was working for a combination of all three of those reasons, or at least like one or two of them. And once you stop caring about if what other people think about you, you're not going to care about if other people think you're a loser. So that's not a motivation to keep working. And then like the whole sex thing, like that depends on where you're at on the planet and what accessibility you have to sex anyway on the sexual market. So if that becomes demotivating, you're not going to be motivated. And then there's like hustle culture, right? And if you're not convinced by having so many side hustles as being fulfilling for your life, that could totally lead to a loss of motivation to work as well. So if you lose those like three big motivations to work, I think you're going to lower your expectations about how much work you need to put into your life, and then you can go off and do those other avenues for securing your existence in some way on this planet.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like getting a passport and just using the leverage of the US dollar for whatever company you work for overseas, and then buying stuff or exchanging that for whatever currency they use over there. Like total game changer. One of my friends, he does that. He went from like, so he kind of what he did was he met a girl out in the Philippines, and he brought her back to the US, and that was a huge mistake, and she pretty much like divorced him, and it was bad.
Yeah, okay.
So
pro tip about meeting women overseas: do not bother with Filipinas. They're good for nothing. I don't care how racist people think that sounds.
I'm gonna let every man for himself decide that, but I can understand the points of caution. But like,
I don't think I've ever met a Filipina woman who had a decent personality, and I've never dated or been with any, but I had one as a boss, and she was a bitch.
Yeah, mileage may vary, but if you are looking for Southeast Asia and maybe Philippines isn't for you, you could always try Thailand or Vietnam, Cambodia. There's a bunch of places. You can go to Korea if you want to. But like what I'm trying to get at is she divorced him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like really fucking bad. And then he goes back to the Philippines, but he doesn't come back to the US, and he starts a family over there, and he has like a fiance and everything. So like I said, like the US dollar greatly improves odds of living in another country, and I would still probably recommend it if you could do it.
Yeah, I understand the point that you're making. It's just that it's hard for me to ignore the details of that story and not cringe at the stupidity of that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he learned his lesson, so.
And I learned from the mistakes that other people make,
and that's good.
Like other people have been burned by horrible relationships, and you know how many horrible relationships I've been burned by?
I don't know.
Guess a number.
3?
0.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And some people make the argument, you can't get laid. It's like, if I really put the effort in, I'm pretty sure I could get laid. It's just that's not my biggest priority. My biggest priority is not having somebody steal from me or take advantage of me.
Yeah, I could totally understand that. Like, that comes down to like Rollo Tomassi, and he was saying like what your mental point of origin should be, and like dudes that are that have anxiety or type of a paranoia about if they can get laid or not. They have women as their mental point of focus instead of themselves. And like, you know, like this is one thing I want to say about Rollo, that he has a lot of like really good ideas, yet I don't think we can blame men for choosing to be sedated. to use his words. That's like what he thinks a lot of men are doing currently when they choose not to date. He think and like consume pornography and like all this other stuff. He thinks that these men are sedated, but if given the options between the path of least resistance and massive asymmetrical quantities of effort, time, and money to get a questionable amount of value to achieve a goal, whether that's like a long distance relationship, short term relationship, sex, or marriage, the issue is not men choosing like porn or OnlyFans or whatever, but extremely poor incentive structures and intractable legal and social issues without solutions. Rollo still needs men to believe that they have more control than what they really have in order to still advertise some sense of control, for men to give him their attention so they can buy his books and watch his YouTube content. This type of hyper agency is poisonous, and it feeds off of a very male need for control to fix situations, and it's completely misguided in situations that are ultimately unfixable. The hyper agency is fueled by a sort of like cognitive dissonance, which red pill, P-way, and like dating roaches or coaches, whatever, need in order to give men a false motivation to keep trying with dating. If you're in this situation, you really have to ask yourself, what is it in life that you actually value, and how much effort, time, and money that you want to expend to get a result? For many men, in order to be happier, quitting may be the better option, and choosing to be sedated may be the better alternative to perhaps committing suicide due to running into constant dating failure. I think that Rollo has good ideas. I even bought his book for my friend, but this to me seems to be like his biggest issue with his advice and his approach to the red pill. So like I just wrote that little paragraph and wanted to share that. I think that dudes, like if you're in America especially, like this hyper agency shit with combined like with a cognitive dissonance, that just makes men it's supposed to act as a motivator for dudes to keep trying in situations that are clearly rigged against them. I think that's how large portions of the economy works. And you end up with like the boomer reasoning where they say you're not trying hard enough and your parents hate you and all this shit, and you're a burden to your parents because you don't want to work or you're unemployed or whatever. It's all a bunch of horse shit.
Boomers are stupid.
Yeah, like you even pointed out, like a lot of this does have to do with like 2008 and COVID. I would say COVID impacted me more economically than 2008.
Well, the only reason I brought up 2008 was because I was mentioning the 2000s was because I was mentioning just that my sociology professor was not like a crazy feminazi, even during the height of when that was a thing. She was just teaching the subject matter that she was required to teach, and that the most left-wing position she had was criticizing AIG, which honestly, if you're not a piece of shit, you would be criticizing AIG.
Yeah, totally.
Even fucking Goldman Sachs criticized AIG, and Goldman Sachs had done their fair share of screwing up the economy.
Yeah, and like the economy, a lot of this is just outside the control of the individual. Like, the one thing I hate about hustle culture is they try to like make it seem like if you're not participating in a side hustle or another means of getting money, they make it seem like you're signing yourself up for a type of self-sabotage, which isn't right, because you're not even guaranteed that the amount of work and effort that you're putting into your side hustle actually matches up with the dollar value that you're getting, because the money's heavily inflated anyway. And you could also be sabotaging yourself through like putting on more workloads than what you can manage, and then it leads to burnout. Yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah, well, when it comes to side hustles, I think that if you can, like, if you're working like a main job and you can find a way to, make money on the side, like, I used to work with this mechanic. Like, he worked at this. He still works there. He works at an auto chain as a mechanic, but he's got the side hustle of like taking whatever he takes whatever scrap metal that he gets, like old rotors, old brakes, just old scrap metal or like old tools that break. And he would collect it, and then he would sell it to the junkyard and make money that way. So he's got his main job, and that's kind of like a way he can make some money on the side. I think that if you can like find ways of making money on the side like that, it's to your benefit. It's kind of like in, say, World of Warcraft. Like, yeah, you can just collect money from quests, or you could, do all these other things to try to make money, like off on the auction house or whatever. It's like if you can help it, trying to find ways of making money is a good idea, but not if it's compromising your ability to function in life. That's because I'm not defending hustle culture. I think that hustle culture is very toxic and stupid, and these PUAs are leaning into the hustle culture very heavily, advocating for it. And I think that hustle culture is probably just the United States' worst cultural traits, just cranked up to 11. Because as a society, ever since Christianity lost its influence, we didn't really replace it with a viable alternative. And I don't want me to sound like I'm someone who's advocating for theocracy, even if that's what we'll probably be getting this year, even if it's a very corrupted, heretical version of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I kind of forgot where I was going with that. Other than that, it's just bad. I mean, if you can get a side hustle, like having a YouTube channel. The Archfiend and Hunter Avalon are two examples of YouTubers. Even if you or people in this audience hate those guys, they have a real life job that they commute to on a daily basis. And then they've got their YouTube channels, which is also making them money. And like a lot of people, myself included, make YouTube channels, put out YouTube videos, hoping one day we'll hit it big, and then we can actually start making money off of this. So that way, if our IRL job doesn't go all that well, or we need a source of money, it's something that you can have a kind of income from, even if I haven't reached that point yet, because you need, like, I think 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of stuff.
Oh yeah, it's a whole hell of a lot.
I'm trying to think of what else I haven't mentioned yet. Let's see. We talked about Syria. We talked about the election. We talked about the United Healthcare craziness. That was like the first thing that we talked about because it's like the most recent thing. I'm just kind of frustrated that, like, on my YouTube channel, I don't know if you have seen my YouTube channel recently, but I recently put out a video essay about Luigi Mangione, and so far it's got about 24 views. A few days before that, on Jan 6, mind you, so maybe that's got something to do with it, I was watching an Asmongold video where he was reacting to Sam Hyde. And at some point in the video, Asmongold mentions how a lot of people shift to the right, that you'll have a lot of people that are progressive or left-wing in general. They will generally have left-wing politics, and they're in left-wing spaces around like progressives. Sooner or later, they voice an opinion or say something that their fellow progressives don't like, so their fellow progressives kick them out of their circles, or they berate them, or they treat them like shit. And now they've lost all their liberal friends because they turn out to be real pieces of shit. And then the conservatives are like the Nebuchadnezzar from the Matrix, where they rescue Neo and bring him into the conservative movement. And that's basically what they do with these progressives, or at the very least they try to tug at them with their politics. They did this kind of with Lacey Green. This definitely happened with Dave Rubin, but I would also argue that Dave Rubin was very unprincipled back when he worked at the Young Turks. Because back when Dave Rubin worked at the Young Turks, Kyle Kalinske mentioned this when he was being interviewed by the Progressive Voice. Kyle Kalinske and Dave Rubin both used to work at the Young Turks. They both used to, well, they weren't like regular contributors. Dave Rubin was he would be filling in for Cenk Uygur if Cenk Uygur was out of town, and Kyle Kalinske was an occasional guest, but he has his own YouTube channel. At some point behind the scenes, Dave Rubin asks Kyle Kalinske, because like Kyle Kalinski's got a YouTube channel and it was doing pretty well even back then. He was asking him, so what's your end game? Is it talk radio? Is it CNN or MSNBC? Or is it, writing books? And Kyle was like, I'm already there. I'm independent. I've got no strings to hold me down. Because if I were to go on to CNN or MSNBC, I would get the Cenk treatment, where Cenk Uygur got fired because he criticized the wrong people. Now, the point that I would like to make is, like, if you are working in, like, a retail store and someone's having that conversation with you, that's a lot more justified, because you don't want to be doing that when you're 30. But,
yeah.
Hell, it was depressing when I was doing it when I was in my 20s, early 20s.
Yeah.
But Kyle Kalinske is making I don't know if he's making a killing off of what he's doing, but he seems to be doing pretty well for himself. So well that he could support a family, being a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. So going to like talk radio or MSNBC or CNN for him would be a downgrade.
Yeah, it would.
So I do think that there's a difference in that conversation between having that talk if you're working as a janitor or in a retail store or at a McDonald's, or versus like if you're at where Kyle Kalinske is now, which is a very enviable position. Because one time I watched a stream between Kyle Kalinske and Vosh where Kyle Kalinske was like kind of like complaining how like his birthday was on a Monday, and Vosh is like, you work for yourself. You could, any day of the week can be a Saturday if you want it to be. So, and then Kyle's like, yeah, but I gotta stream, otherwise it's gonna hurt me financially. So
yeah, I can totally see someone choosing to go on alternative forms of media for their message and for their income. And that's like an alternative way that philosophical gamers was talking about making an income. You can monetize yourself on all sorts of platforms, and YouTube, Twitch, maybe even Spotify. Of course, you have OnlyFans. That's what people are taking advantage of, and I don't really blame them, because like, what's the alternatives? You're going to be working 9 to 5s, getting nowhere fast. Like, no one wants to be a janitor forever, and like, no one wants to work retail or fast food forever. Or at least if you do, like, you must really like that, or I don't know how much of society must have browbeaten you into believing that that's like the best you could do, because like, you don't even have to put up with that if you don't even want to. Like, you could even donate blood plasma for money and be unemployed, and you'll have like discretionary income. Like, if you don't have any bigger, broader economic goals, like starting a family or buying a home or anything like that, before you're like 30 or 35 or whatever as a young man, you're probably just better off working part-time and just saving up your money, and then deciding about how long you want to live in America for.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for me, like, I don't plan on living in America for an extended amount of time. I do plan on using my passport to move at some point, but just not right now. Like, I'd have to go and get another remote work job, which I could do, but I'd have to give up on what I enjoy doing now, which is just like being unemployed and like playing video games and stuff like that. So that's okay for me for right now.
Yeah, like, I'm currently not employed, but the thing is, I am looking for a job. Now, in my local Warhammer store, I did actually talk to a guy who actually knows, like, I think his wife is looking for people to hire for the kind of job that I'm looking for, the thing that I'm actually in school for. And it's like, right now, I'm kind of in a desperate position. Like, I'm not, like, facing the Reaper financially, like, yet, but I do want to have an income. I don't want to be unemployed. I mean, when I stopped working at the shitty auto chain I was working at, like, those first 2 weeks were pretty sweet because it's like that was such a horrible environment where I was surrounded by like some of the worst human beings you can imagine. So I was
Holy.
What's that?
I said holy, like holy crap.
Oh yeah. I wasn't working at that auto shop because I like cars. I did that out of desperation, and now I'm like, after that fizzled out, I'm like, okay, I need to go back to college. I am sick of this blue collar slop piece, just shitty jobs.
Yeah.
Because the blue collar world sucks unless you like being around violent, dangerous, manipulative people.
Holy crap.
Yeah. It could also be the state that I live in, which is notoriously known to be the armpit of the United States. But, yeah, so I'm trying to get out of my situation. And despite what certain boomers say, like, no, it's not always the fault of the person looking for a job that they can't find work. Sometimes employers just have very unrealistic expectations of what kind of people are out there. And just like Elon Musk, it's like, well, if there are Americans that don't meet our unrealistic expectations and have a sense of self-respect, then we'll just import people in that we could blackmail into being slaves. Because maybe there was a time in history where businesses were run by people who had a conscience, but that's just not the reality we live in right now. And I think that's one of the things that's moving us closer towards revolution. If it wasn't, like, that's the reason why people love Luigi Mangione, is they're so pissed off right now.
Yeah, I can totally get that.
Oh, and there's one other thing that I wanted to bring up about that. After Brian Thompson got assassinated, there was a health insurance company that was about to roll out a plan that was going to deny coverage for a list of pre-existing conditions. After Brian Thompson got whacked, they scrapped that plan. So basically, all that proved, like, in light of the assassination. And it's like, okay, so basically what you're proving is if we want health insurance companies to stop being sadistic pieces of shit, doing this Machiavellian taking advantage of people, the answer is not begging, pretty please don't deny us coverage. The answer to get respect is gunning down the people that run their companies. Like, they say violence is not... Yeah, the people that run this country tell us violence is not the answer when you do it. Yeah, no, apparently violence is the answer, because that seems to be the only thing that gets results. Why do you think people respect Muslims? Do you think that people don't offend them because they really feel sympathy for them? Or do you think it might be that they're afraid that they're going to get murdered if they do? It's like...
And that's what happened when didn't that guy, like, run a car through a group of people, like, a little bit before Christmas in Germany?
Who?
I thought he was Muslim.
I don't remember the details of that, but I wouldn't be surprised, because I remember around 2018 when that guy, that incel Alec Manassian, killed all those people by running them over. At first, a lot of political commentators and news outlets thought it was going to be a Muslim guy, because that was the MO of ISIS around that time, back when ISIS was more of a threat, is they would take vehicles and run people over if they didn't have access to firearms or explosives.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, the point is, it's like, what this is, because businesses are being run by people who are evil, and because, like, this prison mentality of, we only respect you if you're violent, this is gonna... You want to know what's degenerate? It's not being able to have the kind of sex you want. It's not having control over your own body. No. My definition of degeneracy is a society that falls in moral decline, in that like we're doing away with an honor system, we're doing away with honesty, and society is turning into Mad Max. That's my idea of degeneracy. But the thing that frustrates me is I seem to be one of very few people that actually think that way.
Yeah, I do think that that type of criticism is going to be more poignant, and it could grow to be more popular. And like I've said this before, I'm an American declinist. So as things do start to decline or degenerate, like I don't really view it as like just a moral failing. I view it as like there's a bunch of screwy stuff going on economically that ends up with people in that position where it becomes a moral failing, and really they don't have really much of a choice. Like I mean, like, look at your situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's like your fault that you're in your position. Like there's broader social factors outside of the control of the individual making people into those positions, and that's going to create a resentment. There isn't really much that can be done in the broader economy. Like you can't policy this stuff away is kind of how I see it. So I look at America as nothing more than like it's pretty much just an economic zone for me to get US dollars so that I can have better spending with them on other parts of the planet. I do think the country is like degenerated, but it's not degenerated in some sense like, oh, everyone's just morally bankrupt and all. I don't view it like that. It's degenerating in the sense that like there was more economic value in what people were doing in the past than compared to now.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have a lot more people in rough spots, and they're going to have to come up with more creative ways to try to get out of those spots. My advice is like, I try to think about what I do in the country like a mercenary. I'm not loyal to the country. I'm not loyal to a corporation. I'm not even loyal to the money. I just use the money so that I can have a better quality of life or get from point A to point B or whatever. Because like there is no objective value to money. It's all just there. Like money is a market as well, and the U.S. dollar is just as strong as it is because there isn't as much demand for any other currency other than maybe like crypto, and gold, I guess. But they took the dollar off the gold standard like during the 60s or 70s. So
I thought it was earlier than that.
Some people do say it's earlier. It depends on who you want to read or look at. Like I always thought it was like Nixon. It was like during Nixon when they did that. But
I thought it was during the 20s because I remember seeing back when I was taking history classes in high school, I remember seeing like William Jennings Bryan, who was the attorney for the prosecution in the Scopes trial. He was like doing his like cross of gold speech. I think he wanted to get the US off the gold standard or something. I don't remember what it was. Even though he was like very against evolution and he was a Christian fundamentalist, he had very left-wing politics when it came to the economics, which is interesting. There are Christians that are alive today who are socially conservative, but economically more left-wing. But unfortunately, the Reaganites are going to be the ones taking power soon.
yeah.
And as far as like my life situation, hindsight's 2020, but I also feel like looking back, there's a lot of things that I did that I wish I didn't do, and decisions that I should have made that I didn't made, and now I'm regretting it. But a lot of people could say the same thing. The problem is, it's life isn't like a video game where I could just like reload a save file and just make better decisions, which is what I tend to do. I do the kind of thing that if Sans was in more games than just Undertale, he would be mad as hell at me all the time for doing that. But it's like I mean, I never made any like huge fuck ups, like getting myself thrown in jail or prison, but you know, I regret not going to college for the thing that I'm going there now for back the first time around, because when I was in high school, I didn't have my future in mind. I was living for the moment. I wasn't going out partying or anything, but you know, I was just kind of just doing my own thing, and my future was not really on my mind. And I think one thing that probably poisoned my mind was like watching like some kids shows that were like, "Oh, you think you're ready to be an adult? Well, this is how awful it is. Be grateful that you're a child." And I probably took that message in a way that was maybe a little bit extreme. I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to think about my future. And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe this is just a childish way of thinking, but I feel some level of resentment towards my parents for not really like preparing me for the world ahead of me as much as they could have, instead just kind of being like, well, it's just common sense that you're just born with all this knowledge. Why didn't you just figure it out for yourself? Even though we helicopter parented you until you were 12 years old, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, figure it out for yourself. That's, yeah. But, shoot. What was, we were talking about, you know, other countries and stuff. Like, I kind of have a low opinion of those passport bros when it comes to, like, the sexpats. On the other hand,
Yeah.
like, but yeah, like, I'm not saying that I would never, like, move to a different country. Even though I could probably get away with speaking English, I personally try to learn the language of the people that live there. Because even though you can get away with just speaking English, if you want to win over the people that live there, which is in your best interest, considering that you're in the lion's den, you would want to try to learn how to speak their language. Like, maybe the country you're choosing is not France or Quebec, but if I were to move to France hypothetically, I would be trying to learn French, because like the people in like Quebec, they get kind of pissed. They are trying to keep they're basically fighting a culture war with the English part of Canada, because from the perspective of the Quebecers, it's like we are French Canada. We've always been French Canada. The English kind of just took us over by force, and now they're trying to anglicize us. No, we're resisting. And so if you go in there and if you at least try to speak French, they're like, you know what, you get points for trying. What they don't like is like the ugly American or whatever the Canadian version or British version of that it would be, where they're like, you should be speaking English. That would piss them off. Like, imagine if like a Mexican went into like a Trumpy area and said, yeah, you should all be speaking Spanish. Why aren't you speaking Spanish?
Yeah, I can see that.
So, you know, I mean, I'm not saying like you're gonna get that reaction wherever you end up going, but at the same time, I just think it would be the courteous thing to do to try to learn the language. Like, if I were to move to, say, Vietnam, just hypothetically, I would be doing a crash course in how to speak Vietnamese. I would try to.
Yeah, and I that would definitely benefit you, because then you would know more about the culture, and you could point yourself around a lot better, and you could understand things. Like, I'm not against like people learning the other languages. I'm just saying that, like, depending on where you're at economically and how quickly you think you need to leave the U.S., I wouldn't think that it's wise to just hold yourself here because you don't know the language.
Yeah,
especially
well, I mean,
like, yeah.
Yeah, if it's an emergency, like, that's a different story. But if you have time, if it's like, if you're predicting that things are going to be shitty in the far future, and you're making preparation now, like, don't just be ready to make the physical move. I think it's like, it wouldn't hurt to also learn the language. But if it's like, shit's hitting the fan right now, and you need to get out of the country like a bat out of hell, then that's a different story. But it's like once you're out of the country and you're not looking back, once you're at that point, like once you're in the country and you don't, and they speak a different language, even if they can speak English, it would be you'd score points with them if you learned how to speak their language, because there's like I used to work with people who speak Spanish as a first language. They have a hard time speaking English, and then anytime I would say something in Spanish to them, like their eyes light up. They're like, oh, he's speaking in my language.
Yeah.
Like they love it when you speak in their language. Like there is a map of Europe. It's got like a list of countries where it's like, you just said one word in my language, we're officially best friends now. And then you get countries like the the Scandinavian countries and Eastern European countries like Ukraine and Russia, where if you talk in their language, they're just like, wow, congrats, but why would you put yourself through this? There was a comment in the comments section where a guy who, like, because in the Western world, the Soviet anthem is a popular in the online meme community. So this guy was like, humming the Soviet national anthem, and I think he was in Russia or something, and this Russian woman just like was like alarmed that he was singing the Soviet anthem in perfect Russian without an American accent or anything, just singing it how it sounds on the YouTube videos. And she's like, how do you know how to speak Russian that well? This is not normal. Like, you must have an ulterior motive for knowing how to speak Russian that good.
Yeah.
But because the thing is like Russian is kind of a difficult language to learn. I mean, its syntax is not hard. It's just that, number one, it's a different alphabet, and number two, the pronunciation takes practice. So there's very few like most Americans are too lazy to learn another language, and Russian is not the most beginner-friendly language. So the number of Americans who can speak Russian and speak Russian well is very, very, very few. So, and then it showed other countries like Germany, where it's like, okay, that's cute, but let's continue speaking in English. And then you have France, and it says, please don't do that. Please don't try to speak in our language. Although there were French people in the comments section that said, it's not that we don't want you to speak French, it's just that that's how we react to people speaking French badly, where we can't even decipher what you're saying. It's like, just speak in English, because I can't tell what you're trying to. I can't decipher what you're trying to tell me, and I can kind of speak to that because I used to work with a Spanish-speaking person. Like, I was new to the job, and I was being trained by this Hispanic woman. I think she spoke Spanish as a first language, but when she would speak English, she spoke with an incredibly heavy accent. And at some point, she said, "Are you mid?" And I'm like, am I mad? And she said, "Am you mid?" And I'm like, can you say that slower? And she's like, "Are you married? Are you married?" "Oh, am I married?" It's like, and I was like, "No." But it's like it took a few tries because it sounded like the person was saying, "Am I mad?" Because I was just doing my job. I kind of had my head down. I had no facial I had a blank facial expression. I was just kind of in the zone, just with my mind wandering off, which is what happens when I do busy work. That's the only thing about those jobs that I liked, is like I could if I'm doing something like cleaning or something, like, okay, this is the thing that's making me money, and my mind's just kind of wandering off. Although there was at least at that job, they allowed me to listen to music and listen to podcasts on YouTube, so it wasn't that bad for a while. But the point is yeah, it's good to learn the language of the places you're going to, and Also, know a thing or two about the country that you're going to. What I mean by that is, obviously the guy that went to the Philippines and picked up a Filipino is an idiot. I'm not sure if there are any Filipino women that are worth it, but as far as I could tell, they're all the ones that I know of are good for nothing. If there is a Filipino woman who is not a waste of space, I'll be surprised. But I'm not holding out for that, and I wouldn't recommend any guy bother with them. Japanese and Vietnamese women, don't think that they're demure and submissive, but they're not like feminazi bitches either. And Vietnam is a country that is outright socialist. And when I say socialist, I don't mean like Republican red baiting, like progressive kind of socialist. The country has the word socialist in its name. It's a Marxist-Leninist state.
Yeah.
But the reason why I have a higher opinion of Vietnam than China is, well, number one, China is run by a totalitarian dictatorship, because Xi Jinping not only has a very fragile ego, but he is a control freak, and I don't envy the people that live in China right now. I mean, gamers and trans people and non-straight people being tortured to death for not serving Xi Jinping's personal agenda of radical traditionalism is not. It doesn't. It's like holding out your hand to the butterfly. Is this socialism? Is this communism?
Like the meme.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Because I can't tell you how many tankies I've run into who shill for China, and even though Jason Unruh on YouTube is a Maoist, to his credit, he doesn't make excuses for China. China is run by a capitalist regime that has really lost its way. Although personally, I don't have a high opinion of the way Mao was actually running China after he took power, because it's like there's a lot of yikesy stuff. I mean, you could argue that being in the power seat is very difficult to steer that ship, but I think he did it wrong. I think that Vietnam has a higher quality of life than China. In general, you're more free there. Just don't think it's like the United States where you can voice any opinion that you want. You can have conversations with people and, talk things out. You just can't go and make a public demonstration, because that could get you arrested. It's like, the quality of life there is pretty good. Just know that you're in an authoritarian country, and just avoid pissing off the government, because they've got a lot of power. And just also know that if you start making a shit ton of money, they're going to want a cut of that. They'll let you be a capitalist, but if you start making a lot of money, like PewDiePie level, they're going to want some of that.
Yeah, it's just kind of like in Thailand, where you're not allowed to speak poorly about the monarchy, because they do have a king and everything. But depending upon, I mean, you're going to have to make certain cost-benefit analysis no matter where you're going to live at on this planet, right? So for some people, it depends on what your incentive and what your goal is for where you're living, wherever you're going to decide to live at. If you decide to live in Southeast Asia, maybe economic incentives are enough for you to just overlook perhaps some of the freedoms that you were granted in America. But I mean, if you're granted a bunch of freedoms in America, right, but you're not in a market to exercise those freedoms, let's say you think your dating prospects are horrible in America and you think they're going to be better in another country, sure, you're free to date in America, but your freedom is wasted, because it's whether you're going to date someone is up to the other party, not necessarily just you. Whereas if you're able to have that market and that desire met in another country, you might be more willing to live in another country.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
But yeah, people are just going to have to make those cost-benefit analysis and learn from their mistakes and learn from the mistakes of others and see what really works for them. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, here's like, I agree with you, but the example that I would use is more towards freedom of speech. Under the law, we are allowed to voice whatever opinion that we want, but there's a reason why I conceal my identity on the internet. Not just because of feminazi stalkers that I have, but if you go out in public and voice your opinion and your boss doesn't like that opinion, you'll lose your job and you'll lose your ability to survive. Is that really having freedom of speech? Like, the government's not coming after you, but the aristocracy, which is the business class, they control that. It's like, if you don't think that oppression by businesses is suddenly better than oppression by the government, then it's like, well, you may as well be living in a Marxist-Leninist state, because you're living in fear of being oppressed just the same. It's just that over there the government does it, whereas over here businesses use the government like a puppet. Or they'll just fire you. Or they'll have something else bad happen to you. They just don't do it directly. So, this cold is awful. So, like, people keep repeating the line, land of the free, freedom, land of opportunity. The United States is the land of opportunity. It's like, well, for some people, and for a lot of us, it isn't. Like, do you think that a poor schmuck living in a slummy apartment in, like, North or West Philadelphia feels like they live in the most wonderful country in the world, when you look at, like, people living in, like, Italy and Spain or something, where they live, like, even if they live in old houses, they look like they're doing fine, eating fresh food, where they have to buy, like, hyper processed shit that's gonna mess up their bodies, just because, like, you can't buy any kind of food, any kind of local produce, without it being something that's, like, gonna mess you up. It's like, the only people who really have freedom are the only people that get to go to heaven are the people that buy their way in, and that price ceiling is very high.
It is.
So, people, like, the Amazing Atheist can say mad shit because he's got fuck you money. He can say all kinds of... If I said like a quarter of the things that he said at work, I would have gotten, like, fired at, like, so many jobs that I worked at with no recourse. He can show his face, I can't show my face.
What's cool about, like, remote work is, depending on where you work at, but the company that I worked for, I didn't have to worry about, like, any of that stuff. Like, I've said, like, all sorts of stuff online that would just get people upset, whether that's on Twitter or discussions or whatever.
Oh yeah, I know.
But, with work from home and remote work, you're anonymous a lot of the time, because all the like supervisors and managers are going to look at is, like, your report performance for the day. They associate it with, like, your name or whatever, and then that's it. Like, people don't care enough to investigate each of the entry-level employees to see if they have, like, an online persona that might have said some stuff that could get them canceled or whatever. So, like, that's an option. If you're an online personality and you're really concerned about keeping your job or whatever, if you do work from home, especially in jobs where you don't have to show your face to a prospective customer, you can just keep working the job and keep doing whatever you're doing, because it's not like the customer is going to know your name necessarily. Like, your name is internal to the company. The people in the company know your name. And honestly, if like when I supervise people, like I would only get on people if they weren't doing their job. Like if you're doing your job and doing your best, like, and you come work like with me, we're not gonna have any problems. Because the customer, like, they don't deal with us; they would deal with corporate for negotiating a contract, whatever they needed done. So people at corporate would have to go and deal with that, not us. So we were like, I could just say whatever the hell I wanted, and I would just still have to log in the next day. So.
Well, yeah, I actually the funny thing, yeah, I did actually at some point see the Reddit drama that you were in years ago, and I was like, holy shit, like the guy that I was talking to was a lot calmer than the guy that I'm reading about online. It's like,
really, where did you like see, was it from Kiwi Farms? Where was it?
No, it wasn't. It was in the anti-natalism.
Are they still talking about it?
Nah, these were old.
Okay.
Nah, these were old threads.
Yeah.
But though the thing is, feminazis, they will talk about this kind of shit forever, because it's like, I mean, like I used to shit post on Rational Wiki, and like years after they banned me, they were still talking about me. I'm like, damn. You know what? Hey, no matter how expensive rent gets, I'll always live rent free in their heads.
Oh hell yeah!
But I still want an extra room. But on that topic though, it's like if you work remotely, then, and if you can make a decent amount of money working remotely, it would be smart to move into an area that's like either really rural or somewhere really cheap. Obviously, you don't want to move into like a shitty city because they suck to live in. But if you can, like, a goal of mine was to like get myself a job that pays decently and then move into like a really rural area that's also kind of cheap, so I'm living far away from a lot of people and I'm surrounded by nature.
Yeah,
that was my goal. So it's like, if you live in Canada, well, I'm pretty sure both of us live in the US, but like people that live in Canada, it's like, holy shit, they have so much land. And it's not that the government doesn't want to use it, because they're starting government initiatives now trying to build northward, because they've got all that land. Like, everybody is like crowded on the southern border where we are, but they've got a ton of land that they're just not even using. Now, I understand on the Canadian Shield they can't build shit, but there's a lot of land that is not the Shield. And you got Edmonton, and Churchill in like the center part of the country. So it's like, why don't they? Aside from that, it's really cold up there. But there are people out there that like the cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know about the Reddit drama from years ago. I mean, I've said some mad shit on the internet, so I'm not going to judge. Yeah, they split off into two different communities. I don't know. Feminazis are stupid. But, yeah, that was a while ago. I'm trying to think. What was I don't even know if there's anything else to talk about. Was there anything else you wanted to cover?
Yeah, just, let's see here. One kind of bleeds into the other. It's not that much longer, but, like, just current situation with, like, birth rates and what countries are trying to do to try to, like, navigate that. And it looks like pretty much my prediction that I made, that like we're just going to keep going down among the developed world, is pretty much right. I think Korea is at 0.7 births for right now, and we're at like 1.6 or 1.5 or something like that.
So are we, I don't mean to interrupt, but are we talking about birth rates in the United States or in other countries as well? Because like
both, yeah.
Because, I mean, I'm more familiar with what's going on here in the United States. I mean, we got like, what, 350 million people in the country. We've got a lot of people, like, we have a lot of people that need work. And the reason why people in this country don't want to have kids is because financially it's a bad decision. The people who are having kids are stupid, irresponsible people that don't wear protection when they decide to just go crazy in the bedroom. They make a bunch of kids. You'll have single mothers either because the dad is an irresponsible person that doesn't want any responsibility, or because the mom kicks him out and is now a single mother and is going on Bumble hoping that she can trick some idiot into dealing with the responsibility for her.
Yeah,
that kind of shit going on in this country is not going to be fixed by like people like Richard Spencer going around whining that white people aren't breeding like rabbits enough. Like the problem is like a lot of the problems in the U.S. have to do with the economy. Now, these Asian countries are a little bit more strange because with them, a lot of it seems more cultural than economic, and I wouldn't be surprised if North Korea is doing some sabotage, but it also might not be them. Their culture, there's like a lot of like hard patriarchy kind of stuff going on in South Korea, and I think that's got a lot to do with that and the 4B movement. Oh, and I also wanted to mention something about the 4B movement here in the United States and how I think it's kind of a doomed movement.
Yeah.
like the public perception of MGTOW, right or wrong, is that it's a sex strike. And there are a few African countries where sex strikes worked, but a sex strike is not going to work in this country. Basically, the sex strike is like, after Trump won the election, it's like you got a bunch of like progressive, dumb feminists saying like, well, if you voted for Trump, then I'm not gonna be in a relationship with you. I'm not gonna have sex with you. And then those men will come crawling back. They'll be so sorry that I'm not fucking them, even though.
Yeah.
The problem with that, it's like, does that mean to tell me that these feminists were fucking Trump supporters in the first place?
Exactly.
What does that tell you about these feminists then?
Yeah, it's a shit test. Like, if you look at rates of like younger men like having sex and stuff, that's on the decline anyway. So it's like they say because abortion was taken away and because Trump was president, we're not going to have sex with you anymore. But it's like, if you look at the rates of sexlessness amongst young men between ages of 18 and 30, like, you're not having sex with them anyway. You're only having sex with like the more top tier men that are around you anyway on the dating market. So it's like, not even hurting the people that they're claiming to not want to have sex with or whatever.
Yeah,
it doesn't even make any sense.
Like, I won't have sex. It's like, I won't have sex with you if you voted for Trump. Well, first of all, I'm an MRA that these women would hate, that they would never fuck me, and I voted for Kamala Harris. So that argument's already falling apart. Second of all, the men who did vote for Donald Trump, most of them either weren't bothering with you in the first place, or if they are in relationships or married, typically they're married or in relationships with women who have the same politics as them.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
The only exception to all of that, because like I know a family where it's like both the husband and wife are both fervent Trump supporters. So that 4B argument of a sex strike to punish the man is based on a false assumption, because the person making the assumption is just really stupid. The only time that they're right is I've seen some of these 4B advocates say that there are men out there, and this shouldn't surprise you. This shouldn't surprise you because I've seen and heard of this happen. There are men out there who will lie about what their politics are just to fuck liberal women.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Undead Chronic.
What?
Doesn't
yeah, him. Oh, he would do that?
Yeah. He has done that.
Oh, okay.
I was watching, I don't remember if this was a stream or a video, like a video excerpt of a stream, where he pretended to be protesting against Israel in like one of these like pro-Palestine protests on a college campus, and he banged and left a female pro-Palestine supporter. So there are guys out there that do that kind of shit. That's the only example I could really think of off the top of my head. But I think for the most part, this 4B movement is going to fail because it's based on a lie. Or it's either based on a lie or based on a wrong assumption. So
yeah.
I
also think that it fools a bunch of dudes that have women as their like mental point of focus, and especially dudes that are scared of FOMO surrounding sex, where they have a fear of missing out on having sex in the future with a prospective woman, so they would fall for something like this. But if you don't care about like women's rights really, or if you're already successfully participating in the sexual market, or you're gonna leave the country or whatever, it's not gonna hurt you. Like they're pretty much abstaining for their own like sort of virtue signal to make themselves look like they're the victims, so they can feel justified in their victimhood.
I think you and I think you and I are probably outliers. The men that they're referring to are like your stereotypical like MAGA hat wearing Trump supporter men from like the countryside, from like what they call flyover country. I think that's what they had in mind. But let's be real, a lot of those men are either single and not looking for feminist women to get in relationships with, or they are already married to or in a relationship with a woman who already has the same politics as them. And I think there's two things going on. One is what I mentioned earlier with the men who lie about what their politics are. But the thing is, if they're lying to you, then how is the sex strike gonna work? Unless you're saying we're not gonna have sex with any men, including men who also voted for Kamala Harris and are super progressive like Steve Shives. It's like, okay, that'll just mean that progressives will die out via not breeding. But you know what? That I'm not going to cry over that one.
Yeah, me either. Like, I've also been getting into like based camp with Simone and Malcolm Collins and their like approaches to these problems, and theirs is like really decentralized. Like, they have to have like pronatalist conferences to try to understand these issues and try to get people on board with what their project is.
Pronatalist?
And yeah.
I'm not sure if that's based.
Yeah, it's that's what they're calling it. And for me, I got more interested in what they were doing because like I'm a transhumanist, so I like to think that we can improve our lives and what we can do on this planet by involving more and more technology. So they're like having children by selecting embryos and fertilizing them. And they intend to have like 12 kids or something like that. So to me, that's a type of eugenics or proto-eugenics to try to deal with this birth rate problem and how people are going to go off and couple with each other to like start families or have children or whatever. So there's like this huge debate, especially among like transhumanists, about if eugenics is like ethical or not. And to me, I view the dating practices that people already participate in as eugenic. If you don't want to like fuck someone that's like in your family in an incestuous way, that's eugenics. So my idea of eugenics is you're like the individual's taking a type of agency and ownership over what type of offspring they want to create. Whether that's socially or technologically or whatever. So
yeah, well, I mean, I think most humans are in favor of some sort of discernment as to who you will and won't fuck. I mean, because obviously society hates child molesters and stuff like that. So it's like, or the point I'm trying to make is like, okay, there's people that is acceptable to fuck, and there's people that is not acceptable to fuck. I think what eugenics typically implies is like genocide with the end goal of having specific genetics remaining, like in a really fucked up version of musical chairs. So I don't know if it could be, I don't know what I'm saying, but I think that typically like eugenics has a negative connotation.
Yeah, it
because
does.
Well, it has a negative connotation because of people like Joseph Mengele, but I don't know. I think trying to maintain the best genes is different from saying, "Hey, that person looks sexy. I want to fuck them." Because like trying to get certain genes can sometimes fly in the face of that, and the people that are motivated by what they find physically attractive doesn't always coincide with what we understand as eugenics. Like, let's just take the genocide out of the equation. Eugenics typically implies, I want this person, or I want this person to fuck this person, to breed with this person, because this person's got these traits, and this person's got these traits, or this person has these, like, nationalities, and this other person has these nationalities. I do think there's a bit of a difference, and maybe you're saying that it's more of a spectrum, but I don't know. I mean, this is not a subject that I'm well versed in to begin with, so maybe I shouldn't really be talking about it like this, but that's just my take.
No, that's completely fine. Like, to me, eugenics it's just a means of trying to, like, improve what odds and, like, what odds of survivability or of whatever traits you might try to find as being desirable in your offspring. That's all that it really is. And there's good ways of doing it and like horrific ways of doing it, like what you mentioned with having, like, the entire word of eugenics has like a negative connotation because it's been associated with like top-down government structures of like sterilizing people against their will and like killing them and all this stuff. But like, honestly, all that stuff is just like, yeah, that's just like a political game to me. Like, if we're not at a point where, like, to me anyway, I don't think we're at a point where we're going to have like these top-down like governmental structures deciding this. I'm more of the opinion of like what Malcolm and Simone Collins are doing, which is like they're using embryo selection, or like what David Pierce would suggest, which would be like you would use germline editing to make it so that like your offspring in future generations might not have to suffer a type of genetic affliction. It'd be something like this, where those that can economically afford it for whatever reason would ensure that they could have better lives for their children. I'm not really too convinced by. It depends on the phenotype that you would want for a trait as to whether like you would find it as being desirable or not. Like, historically, like a lot of people would value like blonde hair and blue eyes, right? I think that's just like a phenotypic trait, and what we actually find amongst people that are more in favor of like of an individualized approach to eugenics, they actually just want to make children that look like themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably what I think is more likely going to happen with this. I think that the associations of like if you're pro eugenics, you're like a Nazi. I think it's just fucking overblown. I think that letting this political debacle stand in the way from people actually like trying to make their lives better, because like I'm still an anti-natalist, but like I have more of a David Pierce like view, and he's an anti-natalist also, which is like, we can make all these awesome arguments about why people shouldn't have children all we want, but they're still going to do it. So it's like, if they're still going to do it, why not give them the better tools so that like at least the people aren't suffering as much in the future?
Yeah.
If we have technology to do it, then like why not? But
yeah.
People don't like it, so
I'm not sure if I'm like I wouldn't consider myself either a natalist or an anti-natalist. Not that I necessarily oppose anti-natalism. It's just that like, I think maybe when I was younger I was a little bit more of an anti-natalist, but I also kind of, because we do need people, and replacing them with immigrants can really go awry if those people coming over start changing the country that they move to. And that's not just the United States. Like, if Americans started moving into... Actually, no. This is actually happening.
Yeah.
People that live in Mexico City are like, please, no more Americans. Because...
Yeah.
Like, this... Like, a lot of people who who aren't aware of this will find this kind of, like, amusingly surprising, but this is actually happening. There are Americans that were moving into Mexico City and causing gentrification, which was causing the people who were already living there suddenly not being able to afford living there anymore because the gentrification drove the prices up. And so the Mexicans who are native are now being pushed out of their homes by American immigrants. Because, like, typically when we talk about immigrants doing something like that, it's usually like, these Mexicans are taking our jobs, or like, these Indians are coming in and they're replacing us. Which, you could thank Elon Musk for that latter one. Yeah. And corporations in general, I think, should, as well as politicians, should be to blame for that more than the people that they're using as a means to an end. But it's not just that example. It's, the Mexicans have to put up with that shit from American immigrants. And what about all those East Asian countries that have to deal with their creepy sexpats? Like, there is I don't like the People's Republic of China. Anyone who knows a thing or two about my opinions that I voice about them knows that I don't like them. I call the People's Republic... I call China the PRC, and I do this intentionally because I recognize Taiwan as the Republic of China. They're the China that I like. The PRC I don't like. That being said, there is the sexpat, who's also a white supremacist, apparently, named... I think his YouTube name is Lawai86. I don't know if you heard of him.
Oh, no, I've never have.
So, Lawai86 was this white American guy who... Now, he moved over to China, and he had some teaching job there back in, like, starting in the early 2000s. And he left China to come back to the United States, I think, around the time that Hu Jintao was no longer president and got replaced by Xi Jinping. And he got this, like, he married this Chinese woman, and this Chinese woman isn't like a man-hating feminazi or anything, but anytime he makes videos including her, he doesn't refer to her by her name or anything. He just he kind of like treats her like a trophy, like my Chinese wife, and the way he would refer to her is more as a trophy instead of like, oh yeah, my wife or my partner, I showed her this thing and this thing and this thing. Oh, she's so surprised by how big American portion sizes are, stuff like that. And then they had a kid, and when there was a road trip where Lawai was with his side of the family, with his wife and the kid that they had, he with his family with his side of the family joining in, were mocking his own child for looking Asian, even though that's like because the mother is Asian. It's like you're making like racial jokes about your own child, which is a sign that you should something that CPS should look into, because he's a different race than you, even though you fucked a woman who is of a different race. So of course there's a chance that can happen. Maybe this is just... I don't remember how I got on this topic, but it's just a big tangent that I kind of wanted to get out about these, like, about these like sexpats and how little I think of them, because you don't need to be a white nationalist to be a white supremacist, apparently.
Uh-huh.
But you can move to another country and even like marry a person from that country. I'm not telling anyone to do that, but if you feel like the United States is going to turn into the Fourth Reich, I don't blame you for leaving the United States if you can. But don't be a sexpat. Don't turn into Lawai 86. The least creepy sexpat I can think of is probably non-compete, and I've got some problems with non-compete because he's not the most honest guy in the world, but it is kind of entertaining sometimes to watch his interactions with Luna Oi, who's a Vietnamese YouTuber who he married. Now, Luna Oi is a bit unusual because most Vietnamese people, even if they do talk about politics, they're pretty cerebral. Luna Oi is a frothing at the mouth, anti-American tanky. Tankies are not the same as Marxist-Leninists. Tankies, their whole politics is the United States and all their allies bad, Russia and China and anything that they ever do good. So
yeah, it's about like immigration. Like Japan has to worry about those same issues with their birth rate, which is why they don't want to include like a bunch of Indian immigrants, because it would change like the nature of Japan. Like there'd be that question, right? Like how much Japan is Japanese if they included like a bunch of immigrants because they needed to fill those labor positions because the people weren't born. The Japanese native people were not born to fill those positions, right?
Yeah.
And like as for the like dudes going like overseas, I mean like if you're gonna get with a chick and like what did the dude expect for his child to look like? I don't understand that. I'd like to think that people are wise or smart enough to know what type of child they want to make if they're going to have mixed race children or whatever. That's I can't really do that dude's thinking for him. He should have known what was up. But with regards to like sexpats, I think it really just depends on what your cost benefit analysis is. Like some dudes, they just go to Southeast Asia like Thailand and they just want to fuck prostitutes and that's it.
Yeah, well, so that Lawai 86 guy is an idiot because he walked into a totalitarian country that everybody knew was an authoritarian hellhole. He took a drone and just did this. He decided that he was gonna like take a drone, have it fly high up in the air, and just take video footage of like the vast vistas of China. He gets arrested because apparently he captured a Chinese military base. And then he was crying, wow. I got arrested in this country, they were so mean to me. It's like, you fucking idiot. You're in a Marxist-Leninist authoritarian regime. You should be lucky they didn't chop your balls off. It's like, I was watching that guy for a short period of time, and then when I saw that, I'm like, man, you're a fucking retard. Oh, I gotta edit that out now. Oops.
No, it's fine. But like, I used to watch a little bit of non-compete, and he would have like the discussions. I don't remember if he debated some ANCAPs, but I know he would like be in discussions with other tankies and people on like BreadTube. So that's how I learned about him. And yeah, his wife's Vietnamese, and they like make videos together and stuff. I remember that.
Yeah,
I guess that's one way to do it, I guess, if that's your winning condition for what you want, and I guess so.
The funny thing is I'm more like, when it comes to non-compete, like, because Luna Oi is kind of a hack when it comes to foreign politics, I'm just like more interested in just watching how they interact on a day-to-day basis, because it's like, okay, but what is it really like in Vietnam? Because like there was like one video they did where like Non-Compete and Luna were like they were gathering ingredients to make like a faux soup, and some of them like they grow some of their ingredients in their garden, which is something that people in this country do here. I mean, like my family does that. We grow like fresh vegetables and whatnot when it's in season, because we live in a temperate part of the country, and they saved a they moved a, I think it's a tomato hornworm. Luna didn't know what it was, and Non-Compete didn't want to run the risk of touching a caterpillar, not knowing whether or not it might be venomous. So he took like a leaf or something and just moved it to a different tree. And then they were cooking together, and Luna mentioned this like cutting board that her dad made, saying like, just, this is really heavy. And Non-Compete's like, at first he thought that he like takes it and just weighs him down. He's like, whoa! He's like, I thought that she was bluffing. Yeah, no, this thing is heavier than it looks. It's just I like watching them interact with each other, just on like when they're not talking about politics. I just kind of like seeing what makes people tick.
Yeah.
And also because it's Vietnam, and it's a very foreign country to what we're familiar with, and like we're taught from a young age that these like communist countries are these like miserable hellholes, and everybody's like living suffering, and it's like they seem to be pretty happy though.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like maybe what I was taught maybe the stuff that they shoved into our heads as children was a lie. I'm not saying that Vietnam's perfect. They're definitely more authoritarian than we are. Their government's more authoritarian than ours, and their military is very, very corrupt and has a lot of problems. More problems than our military. With our government and military, we have more structure. There's more guardrails than theirs has. But it's some like countries that aren't the United States are nowhere near as bad as some people make them out to be. It's not like the United States is the only place you're safe, and if you go out into a different country, it's like a developing country. It's not like there are countries you want to avoid. Don't go into the Congo, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam, it's not like going into the warp without a Jeller field.
Yeah.
I know I'm making a lot of Warhammer references, but I'm a fan. Anyway, is there any other topics you wanted to cover, or is that pretty much everything so far? I mean, we've been at this for like 3 hours.
Yeah, it's fine. We can totally leave it here. It's cool.
All right.
Good discussion. So.
Well, yeah, this is. I might want to cut out the parts near the end where I probably showed my power level a little bit too much. I don't know if that shows my power level, because like I do go to a Warhammer store occasionally, and well, I'm trying to avoid getting doxxed and ending up like Nick Fuentes, even though like I haven't said anything quite as ridiculous as Nick Fuentes. I have said things that got myself, where I've earned myself a few feminazi stalkers, so now I've got to watch my back. It's not like a gaming channel where there's no consequence for showing your face, unless if you're an attractive woman and your name is Christina Grimmie.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the real thing about internet safety is like the only 2 times you got to worry about internet safety in terms of like revealing yourself on the internet is if you're either talking about politics and you're saying something that the powers that be don't like, or if you're a woman who's attractive looking.
Yeah.
Because even though I'm an MRA, I'm not delusional. I do recognize that that's just a reality that they put up with.
Yeah.
So I think that this was a good discussion, and we covered the topics that were kind of like the elephant in the room, the United Healthcare thing, and I hope that people will pay attention to these discussions. I mean, there are a few people in my audience that really do like it. Anytime we do these discussions, they like to listen. There's not quite as many as the people that watch the Asmongold 30-second video clip that I just kind of steal is such a strong word, so I'm just going to say I permanently borrowed without official permission a 30-second clip off of his video just because I thought he made a good point that I wanted to hammer into people's heads, hoping that maybe people would listen. Alright, it's 11 p.m. where I'm at, so I'm going to let you go now. But it was good.
All right.
We ought to do this more often. Or at the very least, any time something crazy happens. All right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.